Konoha, Red Light District. Follow the dimly lit, cobbled alleyway, down to the left, cross the intersection with dusty half-light intersecting to give a brief reprieve. Then into the darkness again as sanity disappears, as fleeting as the half-light of a temporary decision a few scant moments ago. Crimson-red hair, obscured by dirt, grime and the filth of abuse flew in the hurried wind created by its owner. A young street urchin, homeless and desperate at the tender age of 6. The boy ran for all that his unshaped, directionless life was worth. Feet scrabbling for precious purchase on the cold, slippery stone beneath him, as caring as the elderly bystanders that glared, wishing death with their gazes, as he urgently scanned ahead with his own violet eyes. The reason, you ask? The cause of the sudden rush for life? Our dear boy was fleeing frantically from his certain death by a collection of the lowest of the low. The perpetual drunks, the deranged, the simple and capable alike, however joined by the most vexing of them all, shinobi. It was from this cluster of scum and villainy that the young redhead scrabbled around the corner. However, this time his feet did not find purchase, but instead found thin air as his small body found the unforgiving cobble. Suddenly, on the wavering edges of his consciousness, he felt a presence coming towards him. Nay, not the collective hive that threatened to overwhelm his own tiny spark, but a roar powerful and strong like the fire from an open forge, bellowing in complete rage. Katan, Karyu Enden, fire release, fire dragon flame bullet, the voice bellowed, echoing endlessly, however drowned out completely by the crushing roar that the fire technique created, as the dragon-like flame hungrily surged forth, cremating the mob live in an instant. The darkness waxed again, leaving the boy to sweet, beautiful unconsciousness. Konoha, hospital. The smell came first, devoid of feeling, caring, race, or creed. It smelled of a sterile desire. Great, the redhead thought. What did I owe? He didn't need to remember what happened in order for him to arrive at the hospital once more. This time with less bandages and scrapes, he idly noted. As if at the edges of his mind, he felt an odd buzzing, and then as time passed, he felt a strong presence, and the more he tried to follow it, the more it felt familiar, as if. The door abruptly opened, causing the boy to sit bolt upright, fists clutching the sheets, so hard his knuckles were white, refusing to face the man who had reduced his attackers to ashes, lest he do the same to him as well. Who knew, he might have been on the wrong end of one of the various retaliatory pranks he'd pulled. Are you feeling better, young man? The voice queried, not unkindly, though hesitant. It carried none of the rage from the previous night. This caused the redhead to turn, albeit slowly. You're the man from last night, he thought out loud. In response, a soft, hearty chuckle came from the man, whom he now turned fully to scrutinize. Below average height, around 5 inch 8 foot or so, with spiky, short gray hair that included the respectable goatee, however wearing a full red kimono, tied with a white sash and covered with a white haori. It was these things that slowly made the boy's eyes widen in recognition. What are you doing here? He demanded in shock. What would the Hokage want with him? Was it the prank against the grocery store that kicked him out? Now, no need for that, he said, slowly walking over. May I join you? He requested, indicating the end of the bed. The redhead numbly nodded, still unsure of where this was going, fearing a disciplinary talk from the Hokage, who simply looked him in his violet eyes and asked, Naruto-kun, do you know who I am? The now named Naruto furrowed his brows at the man. How do you know my name? All I have is that name, the name the orphanage hag threw at me along with others as she kicked me out. You're the Hokage, of course I know who you are. The man's eyes steeled over briefly, before kindly looking at Naruto. My name is Sarutobi Hiruzen, and the Yondaime Hokage entrusted me to look after you, but it's a fine job I've done so far, isn't it? Now, while I can't do much, as I'm running an entire village, I can do a fair few things to make your life easier. You'll now be living in an apartment of your very own, where someone will take care of your basic needs. And although you're far too young to learn, well, I have no choice. Naruto-kun, do you want to become a shinobi? Naruto's violet eyes widened in shock, but slowly calm, then determination, and lastly a fiery passion crossed his features. Yes, I want to prove that I'm better than I'm seen as, that I'm my own person. Eventually, I want to find my family, if they're around anymore. Actually, Naruto trailed off. Do you know who my parents are, Hokage-sama? He queried, his eyes watching the Hokage intently, unconsciously leaking some chakra. Hiruzen's eyes widened, although this was for a different reason. This chakra, it's almost pure Uzumaki. Naruto-kun, there's something I must deal with, however I'll be back shortly. Just please remain here until I get back. Okay? I promise I'll be back as soon as I can. The Sandaime reassured the young boy, and upon getting a timid nod, he whirled around on the balls of his feet and vanished in a silent, seal-less shunshin. Konoha, gates. Meanwhile, a tenacious youth was wreaking havoc at the gates of Konoha, restraining some shinobi, sending others flying, unleashing fire, water, and wind jutsu everywhere. The trouble was, all of this he was accomplishing with efficient ease, often whipping through hand seals at a blur, and other times slapping his hands on the ground, only to imprison groups of shinobi within the black spidery fuinjutsu that spewed forth from the contact points. The Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, landed before the youth, and leveled his full ki at him, accompanied with a glare that could send armies quivering back to whence they came. This young man instead returned his glare with a dojutsu he hadn't seen since the time of the Shodai Hokage, and accompanied with other traits that he was sure had died out. Shoulder length, relatively unruly dark crimson-red hair bound back in a leather tie, with two jaw-length bangs framed his rather angular, unmarked face. However, it was the shining green eyes with a pattern eerily similar, yet crucially different to the Sharingan that unnerved him so. The pupil was slitted, and the tomo were inverted. However, as there were three, he assumed it to be fully matured, as it would be in an Uchiha counterpart, the Ryuringen predecessor to the modern Dojutsu we have today. Clearing his throat and straightening his posture, Hiruzen assessed the boy further. He can form seal matrices flawlessly with just his chakra, and extremely quickly too. His fuinjutsu skills must be far above even Jiraiya's abilities for him to even use them properly with that method. He's avoided the projectiles of an entire squadron of shinobi ranging from Chunin to Jounin rather easily. But that could be because of his dojutsu. Although his chakra levels, damn, they're close to mine. I'm immediately assuming him to be a high A-rank threat. However, why is he even here? Could he really be Dash? I am the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha. Who are you, and why are you attacking our village? Answer on pain of death, he ordered tersely. The young man seemed to assess him in kind. Sandaime Hokage, said to have known all fire and earth ninjutsu in the village, known as the Professor and the second god of shinobi, uses fire and earth elements in conjunction, capable of solo performing collaboration ninjutsu, wielder of the monkey summoning contract, high S-rank threat. My name is Uzumaki Rakuto. I am a traveling warrior monk from the far northern fire temple. I demand to know why I was immediately attacked upon nearing the village and attempted to be brought into subjugation. The now identified Rakuto snapped, his eyes blazing. Upon hearing of Rakuto's surname, however, Hiruzen's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Ah, so you really are an Uzumaki then, if that show of chakra abuse and fuinjutsu wasn't to be believed. I wasn't informed either of your existence nor coming here, although if that messenger bird that just arrived is anything to go by, I'll soon get my answers. Stand down and come with me, young man, Hiruzen said, turning his back and walking back into the village. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage, heralded as the third god of shinobi, stared down an impassive, yet visibly irritated Uzumaki shinobi, but to little effect. Young man, start by telling me about yourself. Everything that you know. Hiruzen gestured to the seat in front of his desk, which the redhead took without a word. After being seated, he sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. It would be easier to show you, Hokage-dano, if I may, he asked without opening his eyes. Do you intend to use genjutsu? Hiruzen asked with an arched eyebrow. Upon seeing an affirmative nod, Hiruzen rubbed his temples. Allowing the shinobi to cast a genjutsu on him would be foolhardy to the extreme, but given his glaringly obvious Uzumaki heritage, and the equally obvious chakra reserves this boy was boasting, the best he could possibly do was perhaps a B-rank genjutsu, which Hiruzen was sure he could flick off. I give you permission to use genjutsu to illustrate your story, and only for that sole purpose. Any other action will be taken as an offensive action and will be retaliated against as such. The redhead nodded slowly and opened his eyes to reveal the Ryuringen, spinning lazily. Immediately, Hiruzen felt his surroundings change dramatically, making him reach for his concealed kunai holster, but halted his reaction when he realized that the young Uzumaki was still standing before him, although his eyes no longer showed his Jujutsu. Welcome to my Jinjutsu, Hokage Dano. Here, I control everything, although I'm still working on the time delay. Currently, every 1 second that passes in the real world is 5 seconds in here. I aim to eliminate that restriction. However, I digress. My name is Uzumaki Rakudo, cousin to Uzumaki Kushina, and clan heir. My Jujutsu, it was inherited from several generations ago. However, what caused it to manifest, no one knows. I am one of what was 2 children, of whom both inherited the Ryuringen. Before I get ahead of myself, I must explain the Jujutsu. It has 4 stages, similar to the Sharingan, and is the same until the 3rd tomo, which serves as the Mangekyo, so to speak. The 4th, I have no idea what it is, but my eyes feel incomplete, so I must assume that there is a final stage that I have yet to unlock. As for what my brother has to do with this, the 3rd tomo brings a whole new level of visual prowess, including a unique style of the Uchiha counterpart, Tsukuyomi, which I am currently using, albeit incredibly boosting the power and speed of existing abilities. It also enables me to see Tenketsu, although it takes a few seconds for this to work, due to my eyes not being the specialized Byakugan, and as such I lack all other abilities of the Jujutsu. As with the Manjikyu Sharingan, every use of my eyes would result in deterioration of my eyesight. When we were both very small, my brother contracted a fatal disease, and soon perished. Fearing the worst, they removed his eyes shortly before they became infected, and transplanted them into my own body, without me being told until I'd unlocked the Manjikyu, which I did by being informed of this. I believed that it was somehow my fault, and thus suffered the mental breakdown that triggered my 3rd stage. Once this had happened, I was soon knocked unconscious and my original eyes retransplanted. My brother's eyes are safely kept in a secure location to this day. Rakudo closed his eyes, and in a rare show of emotion thus far, his features softened in grief. I often wonder what he would have been like. We were identical twins, thus ensuring his eyes would be a perfect match. It seems even the Uzumaki have a hunger for power, even if misguided by good intentions. Hiruzen took a moment to process this information. He knew all about the Uchiha Jujutsu, thanks to Itachi detailing it in full, a scant few days ago, ahead of a coup d'état that was soon to be planned by his clan. But this information was a whole new kettle of fish. The origins of the Jujutsu were a complete mystery, as he was a pure-blooded Uzumaki and even clan heir. Wait, did you say clan heir earlier, Rakudo-kun? Hiruzen asked sharply. The Uzumaki opened his eyes in confusion. Yes, I did. Why? Because here in Konoha, Uzumaki Mito was responsible for the Uzumaki clan having a seat here on the Shinobi Council. How old are you, if I may ask? Hiruzen explained. Rakudo thought for a moment. I was born around 10 years after Kushina Hokage Dano. My birth was not necessarily celebrated, due to the clan's near extinction. I would estimate that I am around 20 years old. Do you intend for me to take up this seat? If so, I want to set up the clan once more. Actually, the redhead stopped for a moment, and his eyes seemed to take on an ethereal glow. I can feel the potent chakra of an Uzumaki, rather close by. This is good. The clan is set to be reunited once more. It is my dream, Hokage Dano, to assemble my brethren and provide a safe haven from persecution, abuse, and being targeted for our abilities. Rakudo's eyes narrowed during his speech, but soon he relaxed and took on a powerful aura towards the end, where his dream was laid out. Then once I process your shinobi forms, I'll approve your Uzumaki relations and assign you as clan head. We have our next meeting. He trailed off, flicking through some paperwork to find a slim black book. Flipping through the meeting register, he found a page, read it, and snapped it shut. Our next meeting is in 3 days' time. That's more than enough to get you started. Actually, Rakudo-kun, would you mind giving me an overview of your abilities? Hiruzen inclined his head to the side. Rakudo smirked. Oh, you can't find that out the hard way. Can you? Not getting too cramped over there, Gigi? The last comment caused a tick mark to appear on the Sandame's forehead, before he made a snap decision. Alright, you little shit. Training ground 35. Right now? He barked, appearing in a shunshin behind Rakuto in his battle armor, leaving his Hokage robe to flutter and settle on his seat. Wah dash! Rakuto blurted, before being whisked away to the training ground in Hiruzen's shunshin. Now at training ground 35, a wide, open clearing with some forested areas and a modest lake, all in all a generic training ground, save for the fact that it was bordered with chakra suppressant, barrier, and reabsorption seals. Rakuto glanced at them and whistled. Not bad at all, he remarked before turning to a still grumpy third. So, you want to go? Let's do this the easy way. Category number 1. Taijutsu. Rakuto cawed before flying at the third in a flurry of kicks and well-timed jabs, aimed at softer points on the body, like the armpits, stomach, thighs, and the like. Pivoting his weight on his left leg and flooding it with chakra, he shot his leg into a kick, billowing with chakra that took the form of ethereal flame, which the Sandame saw coming and ducked, kicking out at Rakuto's midsection, causing him to switch legs, reroute his augmenting chakra to his new axe kick, which shattered the ground underneath, leaving a modest crater where the Sandame had been crouching in a kick. Appearing from behind in a silent shunshin, the third engaged Rakuto in a blur of hand-to-hand combat, which after a while, resulted in Rakuto being on the defensive and getting worse. Deciding that he'd shown enough, he leapt back and caught his breath. Not too shabby for an old man, huh, you little pipsqueak? I'm the god of shinobi, he growled, eyeing the redhead suspiciously. Before he could say any more, 3 ANBU agents had their tanto blades at his jugular, spine, and stomach. The Hokage silently applauded them for their speed of attack, but cursed them for their poor response time. ANBU, stand down. I'm personally assessing the last known survivor of the Uzumaki clan outside of Konoha. Move aside, he barked, and the agents disappeared. Where were we? Oh, that's right. Category number 2. Genjutsu. He smiled, and it split his face, then his head, and suddenly the rift tore his body apart, resulting in an emerald green dragon, easily the size of the Kyuubi, that spat out a liquid green jet of fire at the third, who dispelled the impressive illusion with a violent snap of chakra, only to find the impulsive redhead to be gone. Up, left, right, behind, below, he thought, immediately jumping up, only to be impaled through the leg as he tried to twist midair by a glowing green chakra chain. So he has the same ability as Kushina-chan then. Makes sense, seeing as they are related. Whipping through a couple of hand seals in a blur, he roared, Katan, Karyuenden, fire release, fire dragon flame bullet, and leveled the area with near white-hot flames, showing his mastery of the fire release. The third blinked. They were standing still, perfectly as they were, albeit with Rakuto's Ryuringen eyes slowly coming out of their spin. Did you like that, Hokage-dano? My Jujutsu, when active, refines my chakra control to the point where double-layered genjutsu are possible. That was my only creation at this point, however the chakra chains, well, yes, I can use them. Rakuto offhandedly explained, but then grinned. For those that knew Uzumaki, it was terrifying. A shit-eating grin that promised doom and destruction. Category number 3. Ninjutsu. Rakuto cried with glee, holding the horse seal, and stopped to call out the name of his technique. Katan, Goka Mikyaku, fire release, great fire annihilation, and released a great torrent of flame from his mouth, while guiding it with a half-ram seal beside his mouth. When the flames had cleared, however, there was nothing but scorched earth and lumps of ash where there were trees had stood in the wake of his S-rank fire release. That's coming out of your first paycheck, you idiot, Hiruzen growled as he stepped out from a relatively unharmed tree. Oh, is that so? Raitun, Jibashi, lightning release, electromagnetic murder, Rakuto hissed, whipping through hand seals in a moment, and then with a wave of his hand, sent several powerful shocks of lightning at the third, who whipped up a Doton, Doryuhiki, earth release, mud wall, in time to take the attack, although it crumbled due to the elemental advantage that Rakuto's technique held. Not to waste time, Hiruzen then fired off his own offense. Again whipping through hand seals in a blur, he cried, Doton, Doryuden, earth release, Earth Dragon Bullet, and no sooner had he completed that technique, did he fly through more seals and called out, Katankaryuden, Fire Release, Fire Dragon Bullet, to ignite the Earth Dragon, resulting in a molten dragon roaring at a stunned Rakuto. He can perform collaboration ninjutsu on his own of this level? I knew he could do solo collaboration techniques, but not of this power. Rakuto frantically thought, should I use this? I suppose he'd find out about it anyway. Now starting through a chain of specific hand seals to the Uzumaki clan, Rakuto murmured the names of the hand seals as he went, stopping with the serpent seal. Uzumaki fuinjutsu. Tento Toriga Kekai. Uzumaki sealing style. Reverse trigger barrier, Rakuto cried, slapping both hands on the ground, and inky black fuinjutsu formulae spewed forth from the points of contact, branching out into 2 points that converged, overlapped and stopped with the Uzumaki spiral in the middle. When the collaboration ninjutsu approached the barrier, it did something strange. Amid a sudden flurry of flames, light and incredible chakra presence, a thin membrane of shimmering light appeared out of the ground, sustained by the 2 prongs of the seal matrix that Rakuto created on the ground, absorbing the ninjutsu that Hiruzen had thrown at him. Hiruzen stood, grounded with shock. Here, this 20-year-old young man had just performed one of the most feared techniques the Uzumaki had, a technique capable of redirecting even up to S-rank ninjutsu, simply by absorbing the chakra, analyzing the construct, and then using the chakra of the jutsu to recreate it, this time encoded with the chakra signature of the seal master. The rightfully feared reverse trigger barrier, only activated by foreign ninjutsu, able to be placed and left as a trap mechanism, hence the name. Rakuto, whilst panting, now clapped his hands together, hissing, Kai! Release! And the seal complied, spewing out the jutsu right back at Hiruzen, who had to dodge in a shunshin to avoid it. The chakra for the technique spent, the seal simply faded away, leaving a panting, tired Uzumaki. There's a reason that sensei forbid me from using that technique unless I really had to. Wow, it's incredible, to tax even my reserves like that. He panted, taking in valuable oxygen, and already feeling his reserves recover. I guess that covers the last category. Category number 4. Fuinjutsu, Rakuto muttered, standing up and dusting off his outfit, which consisted of black shinobi sandals, black NBU-style pants that had green motifs around the ankles, a dagger strapped to each thigh, 2 pouches on his lower back, a dark green undershirt that was obscured by a black muscle shirt with light chainmail through it, and a black haori, with green slits adorning the base, and the Uzumaki spiral in white on his back. Behind this, however, was also a wakizashi strapped to his back. Rakuto turned to a passive Hiruzen, who spoke up. You did marvelous, Rakuto-kun. I'm awarding you with the rank of Tokubetsu Jonin, as you will be on probation for 6 months and monitored closely. Any inferior rank would be an insult. Rakuto nodded in understanding, and then bowed at the waist. Thank you very much, Hokage-sama. My services are the village's now. Hiruzen smiled at that, and motioned for him to follow. Come, Rikuto-kun. You're not getting out of your own paperwork now. Rakuto, however, just groaned. The monks used to get me to do most of their paperwork, purely because of my sealing skills, and thus perfect handwriting. I hate paperwork. He whined petulantly, disappearing in a shunshin in time with the Hokage. Wait, so tell me that again? The civilians can do that. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, you're an idiot. Rakuto frowned, with his arms crossed crankily. No one side of the council should hold this much power. This is because of the finances that you had to direct from their coffers, isn't it? You're the Hokage, man. Well, at least now my paperwork is through, and as of the next council meeting I'm the next clan head. You'll have a fair bit more political power, at least. My clan was very influential, no? Being the wife of the Shodai would not have harmed Mito's seat. Rakuto murmured, eyeing the set of documents that initiated him into the village system, registered him as a Tokubetsu Jonin, and then as the clan head of the Uzumaki clan. That reminds me, Hokage-sama, that chakra signature I sensed earlier of the Uzumaki. Explain him to me now, and don't leave anything out. This I can demand as clan head. Rakuto stared Hiruzen in the eye, firm. The latter sighed, and activated the room's privacy seals, evident by the now slightly muffled sounds. The following information is classified as an S-rank secret, and only being disclosed to you by clan rights. Even though Uzumaki Naruto is not formally in your clan yet according to the village law, that will be processed momentarily, so the delay is of no consequence. He was born on the 10th of October, 6 years ago, to Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, making him your third cousin or so. During childbirth, a masked man, who we believe to be a rogue Uchiha, broke through the barrier. 3 teams of ANBU murdered my dear wife, Buwako, and her assistant, broke the seal and threatened his life so that Minato would save him, giving him the opportunity to take control of the Kyuubi with Sharingan-induced Genjutsu. He then proceeded to attack the village with it, and in the end, Minato broke his control over the beast, but ended up having to use Naruto as a container for the bijou sealing. I watched as the Kyuubi, in a last-ditch effort at freedom, tried to impale the baby on his claw, but Minato and Kushina jumped in the way, saving Naruto. Minato then sealed the yin half of the fox within himself, and within Naruto the yang half. Shortly, they both died, leaving Naruto the orphaned Sandaime Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Due to his obvious Uzumaki heritage, I had to keep him in a low profile purely for his safety, and that I couldn't take care of him personally due to my duties as Hokage. The civilians see him as the Kyuubi in human form, probably not helped by his red hair. I trust you wish to take him in, Hiruzen slowly explained, lighting and smoking his pipe as relief. Of course I fucking want to. That hero has been living a life of hell because you want to protect him, and because of your duties as Hokage. Really? What fucking shit are you on? Do you realize what danger you're putting the villagers in? Or, far more importantly, Naruto? He's 6, you old coot. As clan head, I request that you call a council meeting today. I don't care. I'm going to find my cousin that you neglected. You asshole. Rikudo swore, rising as quickly as his temper, leaking veritable amounts of green chakra, swirling around him like a shroud, and unconsciously activating his Ryuringen, which was spinning furiously. All that, gone in a moment as he disappeared in a shunshin, following his sensory abilities, honing in on Naruto's chakra, which was in a building that Rikudo identified as the hospital. Not caring for etiquette, he barged in the front door and strode over to the receptionist. Hello? Tokubetsu Jonin Uzumaki Rikudo here. I wish to see Uzumaki Naruto. The receptionist's features immediately darkened upon hearing his name. Why would you want to see the Dadash? The woman's voice stopped immediately after Rikudo leveled his Ki right at her. Want to finish that sentence, you ignorant slut? If you do, the Hokage is going to have to clean your remains off the wall behind you. Now, where is he? Rikudo ground out in staccato, slowly rising the level of his Ki until the woman nearly passed out. Lu level 3. Our room 345. She managed, before she did just that, and her head hit the desk with a dull thud. Rikudo stormed off, cursing loudly and flipping off those who stared at him. Naruto was having a good deal of trouble working out what got Hokage-sama so flustered. When people deigned to speak to him, and when they spoke about Sandaime-sama, they spoke of him as fearless and composed. What he had seen earlier was surprise, and he had felt the third's touch of fear. And now, there was a monstrous presence headed his way. He could feel the powerful anger swirling and raging beneath a tenuous stretch of control. Upon closer inspection in his mind, he could feel that the anger wasn't directed at him, but rather at everything around the presence. But it also felt very, very familiar, like he knew this person. Suddenly, the presence drew near, threw open the door, and Rikudo reached the door marked 4 to 345 and threw it open to reveal his cousin, sitting in the bed and looking demurely frightened at the sudden intrusion, but didn't startle. As he regarded his cousin, his features softened and he whispered, Uzumaki Naruto, I finally found my clan. He wept and held Naruto close to him. My clan. He's just like me, his hair, his eyes, and his chakra. His chakra is so powerful, yet so warm and soft at the same time. Is this family? Naruto mused before returning the hug. After sensing that Naruto was feeling quite awkward, Rikudo released him and sat back further on the bed. Not that his cousin's scrawny frame took up much space. At this thought, he frowned. He shouldn't be nearly this malnourished. Not even a regular set of meals, I'll bet. Well, there's time to fix that, he's still young. Well, I think I'd better introduce myself, yeah? I got a little caught up in the moment. Rakudo chuckled sheepishly. My name is Uzumaki Rakudo, and I'm your mother's cousin, and so yours, too. At this, Naruto's eyes widened in shock. Wait, you know my mother? What was she like? What about my father? Do I have a family? Did they love me? The normally shy boy was abundant with questions that seemed to well and flow from deep within himself, the part that he resolutely ignored as it obviously was useless to him. Rakudo's eyes softened and he looked down. I can tell you about your mother, but until you can protect yourself, it's best not to say who your father was. Yes, your parents loved you dearly, and I met your mother once. She was the most boisterous, lively person I've ever met. She was also the most caring person I've met, too. She was a wonderful person. Now, before you ask anything else, Rakudo trailed off, forming a long chain of hand seals, before getting up and placing his hand on the wall, issuing several pulses of seal matrices, forming a complex privacy barrier. He then pulled a scroll and a kunai from his pouches. Naruto-kun, do you know about the basic and most common use of fuinjutsu? Rakudo asked, looking at Naruto intently. Quivering a little under the intense scrutiny, he nodded slowly. Yeah, you can seal items in scrolls and carry them around with you. Apparently satisfied, he then touched the scroll and issued forth a basic sealing array from the touch. When you're as advanced as I am, you can create seals just with your chakra, in an instant. Naruto looked on in awe. Mister, why are you showing me this? He queried, suddenly unsure of where this was going. Rakudo chuckled. Patience, he chastised, moving to place the kunai over the sealing array, and then with a pulse of chakra, the kunai disappeared within the array. Now, Naruto-kun, is the scroll now a kunai? Is it metal, or sharp in any way? Rakudo stared at Naruto, obviously expecting an equally obvious answer. The boy cocked his head to the side. Of course not. It's just sealed inside. He replied, as if stating that the sky was blue. What do you know of the QB, then? Rakudo followed, not stopping with the questions, seemingly eager to push to a point. Here Naruto frowned. It was killed by the Yondaime 6 years ago on my birthday. I think it has more than what is told, though. Why else does everyone hate me? I don't know what it is that I've even done. He clutched at the bed sheets so hard his knuckles went white. A drop of moisture stained the sheet he was grasping so hard, and the next thing he could feel was Rakudo's warm embrace again. Naruto-kun, this is going to be hard to hear, but look at that scroll. The bijou, such as the kyubi, are coalesced forms of massive amounts of chakra, which bear consciousness and personalities, and as such, cannot be killed by conventional means. But humanity found another way to harness them. They sealed them, at first inside grown people. But it became apparent that only a baby's unformed chakra coils could grow with the strain of the bijou sealed within them. On the 10th of October, 6 years ago, your parents sacrificed their own lives not only to protect you, but to seal him within a newborn baby. But not any baby. Your mother would not stand the thought of using another parent's child without offering up her own, against her firm will that you would not suffer the same way that she did. Rakudo broke the news, murmuring to the boy, who shook with shock and threatening tears. It's okay, Naruto. Cry, let it out. You've done amazingly well so far, but now I'm here, and there's no way in hell am I letting you be on your own any longer. I promise, and I never break my word to anyone, Rakudo said firmly. Naruto's eyes shot wide, and grabbed onto Rakudo's midsection, finally releasing the pent-up torrent of emotions that he had deemed worthless and had suppressed them until now. After several minutes, and having cried himself hoarse, Naruto fell into a blissful sleep, leaving Rakudo to lay him down and cover him before he padded out of the room, leaving him to rest. The next couple of days were going to be big. Uzumaki Rakudo and Sarutobi Hiruzen walked side by side to the Konoha council chambers, not needing to share a word. Hiruzen had tried to listen in on their conversation, but was unfortunately blocked by Rakudo's privacy seal, and had assumed that the boy now knew what he held and at least who one of his parents were. Rakudo kept his expression neutral, but walked slightly slower than Hiruzen, allowing the elder man to lead the way, although he could feel the tense aura rolling off him in droves, causing him to smile slightly. He has no idea what I've told the boy so far. This meeting will be interesting, say the least. Rikudo frowned inwardly. Rikudo entered the council room to find 3 tables, one on the left for the Shinobi Council, whom had already seated themselves, the right side being for the Civilian Council, who looked at Rikudo with unmasked curiosity, and finally an elevated table for the Hokage and 3 seats for the elders. Hiruzen took his place and opened the meeting. Council of Konoha. This meeting has been called by the newest clan head of Konoha, Uzumaki Rikudo, of the Uzumaki clan, hailing from the once Uzushio-gakure. He has the floor. Immediately, the civilian side of the council burst out into raucous shouting and questioning, whilst the shinobi side of the council sat in shock. However, the older members had somewhat expected this, seeing Rikudo's inherent Uzumaki traits. Getting rather irritated, Rikudo released his hold over his chakra, instantly dumping the room with an incredibly oppressive aura, weighing them all down with imperial force, and most importantly, silenced the civilian side immediately, most by passing out. Satisfied, Rikudo reined in his chakra and tethered it once more, relieving the room of his pressure. Danzo, however, was floor-struck. This young man, such powerful presence. He is most definitely pure-blooded Uzumaki. Only Mito could level a room with just her chakra like this. As he began to contemplate machinations to possibly bring this man into his overall plans and under his control, Rikudo began his address. Honorable Council, I present myself as named Uzumaki Rikudo. As of this moment, I am registered Konohagakure Shinobi, Tokubetsu Jonin and clan head of the Uzumaki. He bowed, and allowing a moment for this information to settle, he spoke again before he could be interrupted. If Hokage-sama could sponsor and validate my claim to clan head? Hiruzen watched in restrained awe. He didn't unleash his chakra like this before when we sparred. That was just like being around Kushina when she was furious. I, as Sandaime Hokage, sponsor and validate Rikudo-san's claim to the clan head position of the now reinstated Uzumaki clan. You may take the previously ceremonial seat. Hiruzen gestured to the empty seat that resided next to the similarly empty Senju seat, and next to the also empty Uchiha seat. Once he had reached the seat, he did not sit down, instead he cleared his throat, indicating he wished to keep speaking. Hiruzen nodded, and Rikudo took a deep breath, ready to unleash his chakra once more should he need to. Council, as clan head of the Uzumaki clan, I now lay claim to guardianship of one Uzumaki Naruto. I have verified his bloodline through his chakra and physical characteristics. Rikudo intoned, now crossing his arms, as if awaiting an onslaught, which he received. An uproar issued from both sides of the council. The civilians were screaming about the demon having a clan, and the shinobi side demanded to know why they hadn't been informed of this sooner. At the same moment, both Hiruzen and Rikudo unleashed their respective chakra. They both bore down with such force that the entire civilian side slumped into unconsciousness and the distinctive smell of urine wafted over soon after, and one such as Inuzuka Tsum dropped to their seats under the pressure of 2 such powerful energies. Seeing that their goal had been accomplished, both shinobi reined in their chakra and sat down. All those for the legal adoption of Uzumaki Naruto into the Uzumaki clan under Uzumaki Rikudo? Hiruzen asked, and all hands from the shinobi side were raised, including, surprisingly, Danzo. All those against? Koharu and Hamura raised their hands. And those abstained? Rikudo then raised his hand, as due from the member who raised the motion. As those votes for outweigh the votes against even barely, the motion is passed. Effective immediately, Uzumaki Naruto is under the guardianship of Uzumaki Rikudo. Hiruzen gloated, finally having pushed the council into having the boy adopted without having shown favoritism. Excuse me, Hokage-sama. There is one more motion that I wish to propose, but as it now strictly involves my clan, which is a recognized shinobi clan, I humbly request that the civilian side is not present. Rikudo requested, glancing at the civilian side before needlessly imploring the Hokage with a look. The civilian side was speechless. Here comes this boy, and he dares to level his chakra at them not once, but twice, and now he wants them out of the chamber. Oh, he had marked himself, all right? Hiruzen was still internally gloating. Oh, he liked this young man, that was for sure. As Hokage, and pursuant to the code, I now ask that the civilian council vacate the chambers immediately. Thank you for attending, Honorable council members. He kept his voice and mannerisms controlled, but skilled sensors such as Rakuto could feel the underlying sense of victory over the exiting council members. Now, the Hokage turned to a standing Rakuto. What was it that you needed those buffoons out of here for? He asked, allowing a smirk at the reactions of the shinobi council. Rakuto cleared his throat. This was going to be a risky venture. Council members, I recognized that Uzumaki Naruto was the child of one Uzumaki Kushina. Her assets are those of the Uzumaki clan, and as clan head, I moved to seize control of said assets, including the residence of Uzumaki Kushina, to serve as a temporary clan compound and new residence for myself and Uzumaki Naruto. Hokage-sama, if you will, he gestured to the man to start a vote. If I may. Danzo had been suspiciously silent throughout the exchange, but the fact that he had decided to speak set some on edge. Upon receiving a nod from Hiruzen, he continued. As the declared clan head of the Uzumaki, you now already have control of all recognized Uzumaki clan assets, such as the residence of Uzumaki Kushina. As such, he said, quickly drawing up an order, folding it and sealing it, he handed the sealed document to Rakuto before continuing. This document will allow you to collect the deeds to the property, although I doubt there are even keys. As a blood relative, either yours or your charge's blood will grant you access. Rakuto bowed. Thank you, Elder Danzo. I will take care of the matters after the council has been concluded. Hiruzen saw the opportunity and took it. If there are no other matters to be risen, he cast a look around the room before banging the gavel. This meeting is concluded. Thank you for attending. After collecting the deeds from the Konoha archive office, Rakuto proceeded to go to the hospital to retrieve Naruto. As he entered, the same secretary was working, so he sent her withering glare before continuing on to his cousin's room. Naruto had been awake for some time now, just thinking. He knew he'd fallen asleep while crying for the first time in a very long time. It had been his cousin Rakuto that had allowed him to feel again. Speaking of him, he could feel his telltale monstrous yet benign chakra signature approaching from a distance. He smiled. Perhaps he was here to take him out of the hospital? He hated it there, the smell and the stark aura of duty, and nothing more given to him. Opening the door to Naruto's room, he was greeted with a megawatt smile and a boy rushing over to him and wrapping his skinny arms around his legs. Rakuto Nizen, Naruto cried, releasing him from the hug, but looking down sheepishly. That's okay if I can call you that, right? Are we going out of here? It smells bad and the doctors don't like me, Naruto complained, crossing his arms whilst pouting. Rakuto just laughed, much to Naruto's chagrin. Hey, don't laugh, it's bad in here, he grumbled, looking away. Rakuto ruffled Naruto's own mop of blood-red hair and grabbed the boy to put him on his shoulders. Hold on tight, kiddo, he warned, before walking out the door, but ducking to avoid hitting Naruto's head on the doorframe. So I went to the council today, and we're a clan now, Naruto. I also got your mother's house, so we can live there now, he told the boy, looking up to see another grin. Really? I won't have to live in that grubby apartment anymore? That's awesome. Tabeo. He made a fist and pumped the air. Meanwhile, Rakuto nearly face-bombed. He just had to inherit Kushina-nichin's verbal tic, didn't he? Oh man. He groaned internally, dreading if he somehow caught on to it. After filling out the forms to discharge Naruto from the hospital as his now legal guardian, they walked out of the building, only for Rakuto to halt in stride all of a sudden, making poor Naruto fold over his head. Hey, whatcha stop for, Nizen? He demanded. Rakuto chuckled sheepishly in response. I, may have forgotten to ask the archive staff where your mother's house was. Rakuto sighed exasperatedly. Hey kiddo, hold on. We're going to Shunshin. Oh, okay. What's the dash? You bastard. Why did you do that? Naruto swore, his head reeling sickeningly, clutching onto Rakuto's own head for dear life. I did warn you, Squirt. And language. Ah, right. He reminded himself, after whacking Naruto across the head and knocking on the Hokage's door, hearing a terse enter. He did as such, opening the doors and poking his head in demurely. Hokage-sama, I forgot to ask about my new residence. He chuckled, and ignored Naruto's muttering of idiot Nizan. Hiruzen just laughed at the Uzumaki's misfortune.
Ah, Rikuto-kun.
You're more Uzumaki than you realize. The now Uzumaki clan compound is 2 blocks south of Ichiraka's ramen stand and 2 streets before the Hyuga clan compounds. That should help you, Rikuto-kun. I'm afraid I'll have to get back to my paperwork, though. Off with you too. Hiruzen made a mock shooing gesture, and the Uzumaki cousins took the hint and Rikuto vanished once more in a shunshin, landing in the street where there was a fairly large mansion with several smaller residences dotted around it. However, the compound was surrounded by a stone perimeter, with complex seals etched and glowing with self-sustaining chakra around the residence. I wonder if my blood will work, Rikuto mused out loud, cutting his thumb on his teeth and swiping his bloody digit across the blood seal. It glowed green, and the matrix that spanned the entrance stopped glowing, allowing them entrance. So I must be related directly to Mito, then. That's quite amazing. He mused, now walking up to the main house and awed at its size. Gently placing Naruto back on the ground so that he could explore on his own, which he began by running off and shouting when he found a large room or something, Rikuto just headed on upstairs, marveling at how the place was still very opulently furnished, yet there were no personal belongings anywhere. Finally, he reached his destination, the master bedroom. Slowly entering the room, almost being reverent after all. This was last used by a true-blooded Uzumaki like himself. He padded around, through the large bedroom, poked his head into the modest walk-in wardrobe, and out onto the balcony which overlooked the training fields, which in the setting sun, looked beautiful. Sighing contentedly, he closed the doors to the bedroom on his way out, and went off to find Naruto, only to walk in on him spread-eagled on the bed, grinning from ear to ear. "Say, Inai-san, this is my bedroom, right?" he asked, sitting up with the most innocent questioning look Rikuto had ever seen. Leaning against the doorway, he couldn't help but smile. "Of course, you picked this one, so it's yours. Okay? In the next couple of weeks we'll get your own furniture, once I get some income from doing missions and the like." "Wait, you're a ninja? Since when?" Naruto demanded, crawling forward on the bed on all fours, violet eyes wide. Rikuto chuckled, vanishing and scaring Naruto when he put his hand on his shoulder, now sitting on the bed beside him. "Whoa, can you teach me how to do that? Now that we're living together, why don't you teach me fuinjutsu too?" Naruto rattled off, clearly getting very excited at the prospect of someone teaching him. Rikuto's eyes hardened. "I refuse to teach you any of the ninja arts until you start the academy, but before then, I don't see why I can't teach you sealing. In fact, I started when I was a year younger than you are. But, given your drive to learn, it won't harm your development too much," he mused to himself. Uzumaki Naruto. The art of sealing is a very, very dangerous art. You must wield it with precision, skill, and with the determination of an unwavering hand. Even if an explosive tag should blow in your vicinity, your focus will not waver. This I will teach you. In time, I will introduce you to the arts of the shinobi, including the weapon that is your chakra itself. It's not going to be easy, and at times you won't see any improvement or will want to give up. Naruto's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. Satisfied, Rikuto continued. "With the Uzumaki blood in your veins, you will become a target, and I will make you strong enough to protect yourself. Until then, I'll protect you with my life, as you are one of my clansmen. Are you ready?" Naruto's eyes gleamed, and he grinned wildly. "You bet, Inai-san." Over the past week, Rikuto would leave out basic calligraphy lessons for Naruto to work on at his leisure, while he himself was out on missions, starting with some simple C-ranks with a Chunin partner that was simply tasked to document his behaviors. At the end of the week, Rikuto was satisfied with Naruto's handwriting and stepped him up to the next exercise, which was writing out several combinations of common kanji with time limits. This challenge Naruto took up with vigor. One afternoon, whilst he was in the middle of one of these, he felt a presence approach, one that he was very familiar with. Over the past week, he had also discovered what Rikuto called Mind's Eye of the Kagura, an Uzumaki ability that was quite rare, although Rikuto also had it himself. It was a very high-caliber sensing ability, and he was working on it. Using this, he felt Rikuto's chakra signature. It felt rough, larger than life, yet dexterous and supple. Underneath those things, however, Naruto could feel the deep compassion that Rikudo held and the strength that it gave him. Smiling and turning around to the open window, Naruto saw him crouching on the sill, regarding him owlishly. "You got distracted by the mind's eye again, didn't you?" Rikudo sighed, landing on the floor. His outfit hadn't changed much, except he now wore a Konoha hideate on his right arm, attached to a black cloth. Naruto slumped. "I know. It's just, I'm so aware of everything, and it feels so good to just feel everything around me. I lose track. I can't be writing these and ignoring things around me. It's like trying to look two ways at once," he ranted, pulling at his hair. "I don't get it." Rikudo looked on, concerned. He himself had had the same problem, being both blessed and cursed by the mind's eye of the Kagura ability. While remaining so connected with the flow of life around him, it was incredibly difficult to maintain the level of focus that fuinjutsu required. "Naruto, I have a solution, one that I used myself when I was your age. You see, I had the exact same problem that you do. I'm going to try something and see if it works." Rikudo clapped his hands together and sitting cross-legged across from Naruto. He ran through a few hand seals before slapping a hand to the floor, and a chakra-suppressant seal array spewed forth and surrounded them both. Instantly, Naruto couldn't feel his chakra nearly as much as before, and he felt quiet, like he couldn't feel everything. He looked up, smiling at Rikudo. "I figured as much. It seems that I'm going to have to show you the first steps to shinobi training after all. Chakra control. Once you can control your own chakra, you can suppress your mind's eye ability momentarily in order to write out seals. Once you're done, you can then reactivate it. We're one of very few Uzumaki who have this ability running passively. Many members who have this ability have to consciously activate it and sustain it to use it. But," he continued, "that's not a bad thing at all. It means that you'll likely fare a lot better as a shinobi, simply because people cannot hide from you." Rikudo grinned. "It's great for playing mind games. I'm a little sadistic when it comes to that." He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Anyway, it's time to get you trained, squirt." He ruffled Naruto's hair and smiled at his indignant shout. He dispelled the sealing array. Ignoring Naruto's gasp as his sensing returned, he led him outside for some chakra training. Time skip, 2 years later. Uzumaki Naruto sat slumped over his desk at the back of the academy classroom, trying not to fall asleep, as he absently drew storage seal matrices all over the back of his completed test papers. They wouldn't work, as they weren't made from blood-infused ink, nor were they chakra constructs, like Rikudo Nizin's seals were. Speaking of him, he was now a full jonin, having passed his probationary period and had trained 2 teams of fresh genin, most of which now were chunin shinobi, save for 2 that needed to retake the exams next time they were on in a non-hostile village. Rikudo had also unlocked another ability of the Uzumaki, one that the Hokage had said his mother possessed: chakra chains, or, more to speak, the ability to mold chakra so dense that it became tangible. With this, Rikudo could create constructs and use them in battle, proving a large help to earn his jonin title. Naruto himself hadn't been a slouch. He was now a level 4 seal master out of 10, and had mastered the B-rank Kinjutsu, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique, as a replacement for the standard Bunshin no Jutsu. You should be able to remember this no Jutsu that Rikudo had taught him. He also had a very impressive control over his chakra for someone his age and chakra reserves, being able to shut off his mind's eye of the Kagura for a record of 5 minutes and 43 seconds, enough to write out a B-rank seal, according to Rikudo. His clothing choice had also changed. Now opting to dress like his cousin, he wore black shinobi sandals, simple black shinobi pants with orange motifs, and a simple orange t-shirt with the Uzumaki clan symbol in black and white. Being an academy student and not being allowed to carry weapons, he couldn't mimic his role model any further. He was cut off from his musing by a rather loud shout. "Naruto, what was one of the most dangerous jutsu used by the Nidaime Hokage?" Naruto looked up blearily, his red hair in a disarray and eyes unfocused. "Wah!" he mumbled, before Irika used his big head technique to startle him awake further. Suetun, Swishoha." Naruto remembered quite clearly, as Rikudo had given him a demonstration after Naruto had reported what he'd learnt that day. "Humph. Don't sleep in class, it's disrespectful. Irika chastised, moving on to collecting papers and passing them off to be marked, just as the bell rang, and the students cleared the room faster than the Inuzuka dogs released first thing in the morning. Rikudo was, as often as he could, waiting outside for the young redhead to emerge. Grinning when he caught sight of his beloved cousin, they fist-bumped, and at the moment of contact, Rikudo used his shunshin to take them back to the Uzumaki compound. There, much to Naruto's confusion, was the Hokage and a man he hadn't met, but had a fair idea that he should know who he was. He had long white spiky hair, wore a horned hideate that had a kanji for oil on it, red lines running from underneath his eyes, and wore a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with handguards, a simple black belt, geta, a red haori with 2 simple yellow circles on each side, and a large scroll hanging from his lower back. After assessing this man's appearance, Naruto knew just who this was, but it only served to further his confusion. What is someone like one of the 3 Sannin doing here? Rikudo bowed, and nudged Naruto to do the same.
Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sama.
Welcome to the Uzumaki compound. Please follow us in. I'll get some leftover cake and we'll talk over drinks. Rikudo motioned towards the door. Once the tea had been served and cake had been devoured by Naruto, Rikudo cleared his throat. So what brings you here, Jiraiya-sama? Certainly not visiting someone that you have obligations to. No. Rikudo's tone was sharp, and his glare deadlier. Jiraiya, for his part, remained silent, but marveled at the ki that this young man was leaking. His full intent would be impressive for someone his age, judging by the potency of his unintentional leak. Naruto's hands were shaking, and a bead of sweat rolled down the back of his neck. He'd only felt Rikudo-Nizan this angry once. It was the day that he'd adopted him into his own clan and saved him from the village's clutches. Rikudo noticed this and clamped a hold on his leaking ki, putting a comforting arm around Naruto's shoulders. Hey, sorry kiddo, didn't mean to frighten you like that. Comforted by the hug and his soft words, Naruto's shaking stopped, and he smiled at him in response. You idiot, he mumbled, pouting with his arms crossed. Jokes aside, we are here for a very good reason. Daimyo-sama has heard of your existence. He requests that you present yourself and your charge here to him so that he may meet the next clan head. Hiruzen explained, reaching towards his pipe before Rikudo cleared his throat. And I request that you don't smoke within the building, Hokage-sama. Pausing for a moment, he put it away within his robes, as Jiraiya spoke up for the first time. He's basically dragging you to the palace to make a show out of you. This is a huge problem. It'll put you on the spotlight for the world to see, in the form of gossip and the perpetual threat of court spies. If anything Sensei has told me about your abilities, I have utmost faith in your ability to protect Naruto. But should it come to that, I doubt you'll care too much about collateral damage, being an Uzumaki and all. Rikudo held up both hands in mock surrender. Guilty as charged. Anyone who so much as points a blade in his general direction will have said blade stabbed through their asses. Jiraiya smiled. Well then, that's comforting at least. But that's not why I'm here, Percy. I'm here as your official escort. Sensei here is pulling the big guns purely because you two are currently the last known Uzumaki, and the last alive that bear the blood so true. Thus, Konoha cannot afford to risk your bloodline, with both of you being males and all. That, my friend, is another matter that you'll have to take up in your own time. Jiraiya suddenly sported a lecherous grin. And do tell me about it all. He smiled dreamily, before being brought harshly back to reality by an irate Hokage. Act the part, Jiraiya-kun. Rikudo-kun, he summoned the both of you in 2 weeks' time, which is plenty of time to get stocked, and verse yourself on politics. As a clan head of Konoha, it is not unseemly at all for the daimyo to have direct conversation with you, on occasions such as this. You had best know what you're up to, Hiruzen warned, before standing and straightening his robes. Actually, Jiraiya-sama, I must ask that we spar outside. It would be a great opportunity for me to dish out some anger that I'm carefully controlling. I won't be able to do much, but you'll get where I'm coming from, given that your bones aren't creaking too much today. Rikudo sighed, crossing his arms. Naruto was about to pipe up and confirm what Rikudo was saying, before he sat right back down at the level of Ki that Jiraiya was emitting. Rakuto opened his eyes to see a kunai aimed right between his eyes. "Wanna finish that, brat? Outside!" Jiraiya growled, grabbing Rakuto by the collar and disappearing outside via Shunshin. Hiruzen sighed resignedly. "Well, Naruto-kun, we'd better follow them to make sure they don't wreck the place. Your cousin sure does know how to get a fight out of people, doesn't he?" Naruto laughed and nodded, and widened his eyes upon seeing Hiruzen reach for his shoulder. "You're not gonna dash. Ack, surprise Shunshins are a bad time. I thought I already whined about this," Naruto complained petulantly, but soon ducked under a flaming glob of oil that would have fried him. Over to where Rakuto was venting on Jiraiya for abandoning Naruto to the village, the latter was getting more and more surprised at how well the redhead was faring. His taijutsu was simply superb. His style was quick, fluid, and delivered sharp, painful hits and kicks to softer areas on the body. But having trained with Minato in a similar style, he knew how to counter, and as such Rakuto was having trouble getting any hits on the Sannin. Deciding that taijutsu was a dead end, he jumped back and ran those several hand seals and surged his chakra so much it cracked the ground, before shouting, "Suetun, Bakuswa Shoha!" Water release. Exploding water colliding wave and expelling incredible amounts of water from his mouth, before the water rushed at Jiraiya in waves at high speeds, threatening to flatten the Sannin if he didn't move or protect himself. Jiraiya also blurred through seals, before creating a Doton Dorihiki to block the wave, although the wall cracked in some places, but held. The aftermath of the technique was an artificial pool, held in by the array of barrier seals and suppressants that defined the training field. Not seeing Rakuto around anywhere, Jiraiya looked down through the water he was standing on, only to frown in surprise, for underneath him on the ground was a modest restraining seal, made from glowing green chakra. "So you can create chakra construct seals, huh? Pretty advanced stuff, brat," Jiraiya called out. "But I'm not a seal master for nothing," he cawed before throwing down a seal tag that broke him out of the restraining seal. "You call yourself a seal master, but really you have to use paper and ink? Lame," came Rakuto's voice, and when he turned, so did his stomach. Rakuto came flying at Jiraiya, having used the low-level seal as a distraction to power up his new technique, unique to the Uzumaki, dense chakra constructs. His entire right arm was now coated in dense green chakra that was even now hardening to form a clawed gauntlet on his hand, armored plates on his forearm and upper arm, and a horned plate on his shoulder. Entering a swift battle of reflexes, Rakuto switched to a stance that favored his left side, and used his right in a mixture of slashes, thrusts, punches, and swatting away Jiraiya's attacks, with the deadliness of a blade and the safety of armor, but the nimbleness of a bare arm. Jiraiya, unused to tactics like this from the young man, spent the next few minutes taking hits on his arms and stomach from Rakuto's chakra gauntlet arm, whilst marveling at the difficulty of the technique he was using. Now tired of being on the defensive, he stopped holding back and sent the Uzumaki into the barrier, who slumped and groaned, letting his chakra gauntlet fade.
Wow, brat.
Chakra is incredibly difficult, near on impossible to control once it leaves the body. I look forward to what you can accomplish once you train more with it, Jiraiya said, offering a hand to Rakuto, who simply got up and went to walk right past him, but paused. Don't think that because we had a spar and you handed out some paltry compliments that I'm going to ignore the fact that you ignored your godson, my clansman and cousin for 6 years, while he was abused physically, emotionally, and spiritually. You can shove that hand up your ass, Rakuto snarled, before walking back to Hiruzen and Naruto. Naruto, go inside and keep working on your barrier exercises. I want a stable barrier up by the time we leave for the daimyo's palace. You hear me? Rakuto shooed Naruto off towards the mansion. Sure, Rakuto and he chirped, running off. Do you really think that having this sort of tension before I'm protecting you is such a good idea, brat? Jiraiya asked, leaning against a nearby tree. I think that it's important that you know exactly what I think of you. I don't need your opinions on the tension that I've created by venting my anger towards you, which I rightfully have, as Naruto's clan head, legal guardian, and cousin. You're on the mission simply as a deterrent. I won't even have to lift a finger, dear bodyguard. Rakuto spat, not even moving to face Jiraiya, but turning towards the Hokage.
Hokage-sama.
I trust that you make your leave when you wish. I encourage you to explore the grounds. There are some wonderful spots for meditation, if you want a break from the paperwork. You are here arranging an important diplomatic escort mission. No, Rikudo bowed, before vanishing in a shunshin. He's very bitter, isn't he? Jiraiya remarked, turning to his mentor. What's with that? I thought the Uzumaki were a rather rowdy, positive bunch, like Naruto is. Hiruzen sighed, and began walking. Walk with me, Jiraiya-kun. Rikudo-kun has had a very rough beginning and has been a shinobi as long as he can remember. Shouldering the responsibility of clan head, and the clan itself amongst other things, has led him to be very protective of the Uzumaki and anything he has worked hard towards. He is very bitter towards the both of us, Jiraiya-kun. Me for allowing him to be neglected, but has relented somewhat after I've made amends and assisted with Naruto-kun's upbringing. As for you, I know your reasons, but he doesn't. He thinks that you chose to ignore and neglect Naruto-kun out of selfishness, and yes, it's partially the reason, I know it is. He views Naruto-kun like a little brother, and will stop at nothing to protect him. That will apply to any other clansman that he finds, I fear. I fear so because of what they'll be like when within a kilometer radius of each other. Hiruzen had a laugh. But Jiraiya-kun, give him time. Perhaps this trip is a good opportunity to not only foster some positive relations with Naruto-kun, but to ease the negativity that Rikudo-kun holds towards you as well. Hiruzen looked into the pond that they had approached, and at the numerous koi fish that darted around beneath the glassy surface. I'm old, Jiraiya-kun. Don't make my mistake, and leave negativity alone purely because you're afraid of the ramifications that come from messing with it. The 2 weeks wait for the journey passed quickly for Naruto, who'd made great progress with basic barrier seals, almost as if instinctively understanding them, much to Rikudo's glowing pleasure, finally having someone who understood just how amazing barrier seals were, and much to Naruto's confusion, spent many hours ranting about how he'd used them. On the other hand, Rikudo had finally stabilized his chakra armor, but insisted that it wasn't yet battle-ready. He'd begun actively participating in the council meetings, becoming a vocal supporter of the Hokage and proving a valuable force in stabilizing the balance of power on the village council. Holding the Uzumaki seat came with a lot of political clout. Suddenly, a very loud and very unwelcome blaring roused Rikudo from his sleep. Blearily opening his unfocused eyes, he located the source of the intrusion on his slumber, his mortal enemy, the alarm clock. Slamming a chakra-reinforced fist down onto the poor little unit, it simply stopped its awful racket. As he slowly came to, he remembered the reinforcement seals he'd placed on it the night after he'd arrived in the Uzumaki mansion, after he'd smashed one the next morning. Fucking seal-reinforced fucking alarm clocks going off for fucking missions and shit. Rikudo grumbled darkly, fumbling his way into the bathroom for a shower to hopefully wake him up. A good 20 minutes later found Rikudo descending the stairs into the living area, to find Naruto happily crunching on cereal, already dressed and ready to go. Morning, Rikudo nii, he chirped, muffled through a mouthful of cereal. Throwing a dead wave and walking to the coffee machine, Naruto wasn't offended, being used to pre-coffee or pre-adrenaline Rikudo. So, Naruto, you ready for this? We'll be traveling at shinobi speeds, but you've mastered all of the chakra control exercises I've thrown at you so far, so you'll be fine as far as that goes. The minute you get tired, you say something, all right? That's an order. I'll carry you from there. We can't afford to seem anything but bright and bushy-tailed. It's the daimyo we're presenting ourselves to here. Rikudo mumbled, gingerly nursing his coffee as he slowly came to life. Sure, Nii-san. So when do we leave? Will we see the castle? Will there be princesses and we'll save him? Naruto bounced up and down eagerly. Let's go! He cried, only to be caught by the back of his shirt by Rikudo, then dragged back to the table. Sit down, will ya? You haven't even finished your cereal. Rikudo sighed, palming his face. Basically what we're doing is going to see the daimyo, and getting his formal endorsement to settle in Hainokuni, or more specifically, Konoha. With his approval, we'll be on equal grounds with the other shinobi clans, and in a much better situation. On the other hand, it'll raise our profile way too high. We'll be targeted simply because of the hair we have, and the blood that runs through our veins. Rikudo sighed, glancing at Naruto, who seemed to have sobered to the situation, and began to look worried. Rikudo reached across and ruffled the young boy's hair, much to the latter's ire. "Don't touch the dew, Anaisen. It's messy enough as it is," he whined. "Naruto, you know I'll protect you with everything I have, right?" he asked, looking directly at him. Naruto just nodded, to which Rikudo smiled. "Good. Go on, squirt. Get your stuff. We're leaving for the Hokage's office." Rikudo grabbed his coffee mug and, giving it a quick wash, dumped it in the drying rack. Less than 30 seconds later, Naruto came barreling down the stairs, only for his face to fall in dread as Rikudo's arms awaited him at the base. "No, no, 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 you Urien!" Naruto yelled, only to vanish with Rikudo in a distortion of space. "Ugh, when will you not do that? I swear it wouldn't be so bad if I could at least have some notice. Sheesh," Naruto grumbled, crossing his arms and pouting, earning the laughter of the Hokage and some restricted chuckling from Jiraiya. Realizing where they were, Naruto straightened and gave the Hokage a loose salute. "Hokage-ji," he chirped, completely stumping Jiraiya and negating the previous salute entirely. "Well, Jiraiya, Uzumaki Rikudo, Uzumaki Naruto, are you ready to embark on the A-rank mission to the royal palace?" Hiruzen asked, now serious and meaning business. "A-rank, Gigi?" Naruto asked, clearly confused, if his cocked head and narrowed brows weren't anything to go by. "Isn't this just an escort mission, sorta?" he elaborated, tilting his head further. "You'll likely encounter fairly dangerous shinobi whilst on this mission, Naruto-kun, simply because they're hunting you. I trust Rikudo-kun has been over this with you." Hiruzen looked to Rikudo, and upon receiving a nod in the affirmative, continued. "As for that reason, I've assigned this as an A-rank mission. Uzumaki Naruto, you are to stay with Uzumaki Rikudo at all times, and to follow his orders. Uzumaki Rikudo, I'm assigning you the leader of this mission, as it is for your clan that you do this. That said, I encourage you to take counsel from Jiraiya. He's been at this longer than you've been alive." Hiruzen winked, and had to suppress a laugh at the indignant look on Jiraiya's face. "Now off with you. Get this crap over with so that I can get you back to fixing our seals, you three." "Yes, Naruto-kun. When Rikudo-kun here says you're ready, I'll put you to work, so you can earn some of your own money. How'd you like that?" Hiruzen asked, glancing at Rikudo, who gave Naruto an encouraging nod. "Sure, Hokage-ji." He pumped the air. "Let's go." It had been several hours since the small group had left Konoha, and Naruto was engrossed in a scroll regarding preservative properties of seals, and was completely oblivious to the outside world save for miraculously navigating the tree branches, leaving Jiraiya and Rikudo in an awkward silence. "Jiraiya-dano, I trust you know about the unintended pit stop that I have to make?" Rikudo yawned, subtly tapping his leg 3 times. Understanding the message, he smirked. So the kid has some idea, after all. After grabbing Naruto and slapping the ground with his other hand to lock him in a barrier, Rikudo vanished in a whirl of speed, only to appear on the other side of a tree several meters away, hanging from a branch from his feet, and Ryuringen eyes glowing a menacing green, behind a crouched assassin who, upon feeling his barely concealed presence, turned around and froze in pure fear. Tsukuyami. The man stood alone, on a plain of white and a gray sky that stretched off infinitely in all directions. "Welcome to my world where I control everything. Time, space, perception of all things, including, most importantly, pain," Rikudo hissed, phasing into view, Ryuringen eyes spinning furiously. "You made the foolish mistake of coming after either myself or my clansmen. For that, I doubt you'll last long here." Rikudo placed a hand on the hilt that protruded from behind his shoulder, and in a flash of green, he'd drawn it, jabbed out both of the assassin's eyes, and slashed across his stomach, leaving the man to collapse in agony, whilst roaring out his pain, gritting his teeth through the blood now pouring down his face, and the intense searing pain that came from his stomach leaking its acids into his body. Then came a slow whisper. "Retrieve your comrades and leave this place if they're still alive. Do so and I will spare you." And suddenly, the man found himself yet again in a plain of white and the gray sky that stretched off infinitely in all directions. "Welcome To my world where I control everything. Time, space, perception of all things, including, most importantly, pain. Rikudo hissed, phasing into view, Ryuringen eyes spinning furiously. You made the foolish mistake of coming after either myself or my clansmen. For that, I doubt you'll last long here. Rikudo again placed a hand on the hilt that protruded from behind his shoulder, and in a flash of green, he'd drawn it, jabbed out both of the assassin's eyes, and slashed across his stomach, leaving the man to collapse in agony, whilst roaring out his pain, gritting his teeth through the blood now pouring down his face, and the intense searing pain that came from his stomach leaking its acids into his body. Then came a slow whisper that repeated itself with a ghastly echo. Retrieve your comrades and leave this place if they're still alive. Do so and I will spare you. Yet again, the scene reset itself and played out endlessly, and as the man collapsed at the resetting of the scene, Rikudo's voice came through. That was just a second. I hope you enjoy the next 15 seconds. Rikudo's eyes slowed their spinning, and the dojutsu faded from his eyes, and he slunk back behind the tree, leaving the man to gasp and claw at the tree, making weak movements towards his back pouch, eyes growing heavier by the second. At long last, he brought the whistle to his lips, and with his last breath before falling into unconsciousness, he blew. Turning around to heed the emergency flee-on sound whistle was the third assassin's mistake, meeting the furious eyes of Rikudo, and the ethereal chakra blade that shot from his hand, right through between his eyes and out the back of his head. As he dissipated the blade, he cursed himself. Naruto was on his butt, shaking and staring at Rikudo as if he was death incarnate. He flinched and went to back away as Rikudo broke the barrier, but stopped when he felt Rikudo's arms around him. Releasing his fear once he felt Rikudo's chakra, he sobbed and gripped onto Rikudo like his life depended on it. Simply trusting that Jiraiya had dealt with the last enemy, Rikudo reined in his chakra and instead exuded it in calming waves, hoping to soothe the frightened redhead in his grasp. After some moments, Naruto calmed down and sat cross-legged in front of Rikudo, with Jiraiya standing off to the side, seeing as this was a personal moment, and also fearing Rikudo would unleash those eyes on him, too. Naturally, after simply killing his assassin, he arrived to see how Rikudo was faring, only to see those utterly frightening eyes, piercing green, and filled with fury, not to mention the results of the man who took it head-on. Shaking off the memory, he turned away to make some notes about adjusting the measurements in his book. Listen, Naruto. I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that so soon, but I'm also not sorry at all. Naruto's eyes widened at this, and he looked at Rikudo, confused. I'm not sorry because you've almost had your first kill in terms of shock factor. Do you want to protect Konoha, the Uzumaki, and the Will of Fire? If so, then it will become necessary to kill. I don't like doing it, but if anyone, and I mean anyone, threatens my family, my village, or anything that I swear to protect, I will kill them without hesitation. Do you know why, Naruto? Because I love my family, my new village, and I do not go back on my word. I do this because it's how I was raised to live. The Uzumaki commit to their promises, no matter what. Rikudo made a fist and held it out to Naruto, who returned the gesture. What you saw then was how serious I get when someone threatens my family and my village. It was scary, wasn't it? I reacted much the same as you did when my sensei did the same thing, protecting me. But that's a story for another time. Rikudo smiled wanly at Naruto while standing up. He noticed Naruto was still a bit shaky, so he wordlessly knelt and placed his hands behind his back, offering for a ride. Naruto couldn't bring himself to refuse on principle of his pride. He was truly shaken to the core. He'd felt Rikudo and Ii's Ki before, back when he'd first met Jiraiya, but this was nothing like what he'd experienced back then. This was pure, unadulterated Ki, and it terrified him. He felt when Rikudo used his eyes on the first man. He could feel the utter hopelessness and terror, and he saw and felt the utter cold fury in the red-headed man when he sent a chakra sword straight through the second enemy's head. It was paralyzing fear that gripped him and made him irrationally fear his cousin when he came to free him from the barrier, and he cursed. He'd have to get a hold of himself and become as strong as Rikudo and Ii. I swear. And Uzumaki clan members commit to their promises, no matter what. Steeling himself to his newfound resolve, Naruto smiled and gladly climbed onto Rikudo, gripping him in his warm, protective chakra, soon falling asleep. Rikudo, feeling Naruto's chakra stabilize and then seemingly bolster, smiled. He turned to Jiraiya to find the man looking forward, lost in thought. Deciding now was the time to leave, he called Jiraiya with a quick whisper of his name and leapt to the trees. A couple of hours later, Jiraiya felt that they were safe, and so he turned a questioning look to Rikudo, who nodded and crouched to a stop on a tree branch, with his eyes closed. After a few moments, Rikudo opened his eyes and stood, still carrying a blissfully asleep Naruto. "We're alone, and there's not another human around for at least 10 kilometers. He murmured, motioning to the base of the tree which had sufficient room for 3 sleeping bags and a small fire. "Down there looks good." He left no room for argument, simply stepping off the branch and strolling down the trunk, and jumping off the last couple of meters. The landing startled Naruto awake, who gripped Rikudo tightly until he figured out that he was still with the 2 men. "We're going to stop here for the night, Naruto. Come on, get your camping gear out so you can sleep. Here, I'll help you." Rikudo crouched in front of Naruto, pulling out his supply scroll to unseal his belongings for him. As this was happening, Jiraiya, who'd already set up his equipment, sat and watched pensively. The young man really does care a lot for the brat. Already I can see the results from some of the training he started him on, fuinjutsu being the beginning, but even in his tired state, I can see the kid keeping an eye on his surroundings. As Jiraiya mused, he'd realized that Naruto had already fallen asleep, and Rikudo was meditating. "Finally snap out of your daydream there, bodyguard? You're not much use if you're not alert. Relying on my sensory abilities will get you nowhere," Rikudo pointedly remarked, before turning to face Jiraiya. "You take first watch. Wake me up in 4 hours." Rikudo turned and wrapped himself in his sleeping bag, quickly falling asleep, yet still maintaining a subconscious sensory field, as any sensor worth their salt does. "TCH, not like I was going to get any sleep regardless," Jiraiya muttered, before adjusting his seating to be more comfortable, and leant back against another tree trunk. Soon enough, Rikudo's eyes snapped open when he felt Jiraiya approach. "I'm awake. Take your rest, we leave in another 4 hours," Rikudo murmured, getting up to resume the watch. Jiraiya, not one to argue when presented with sleep, dismissed the notion of provoking the redhead and simply went to sleep, albeit rather disgruntled at being ordered around, even if it was by the client, so to speak. Jiraiya awoke to a hand on his shoulder, and like Rikudo had done, snapped awake instantly and began packing his things. Naruto, on the other hand, took a bit longer to wake from obvious lack of field experience that Jiraiya had in spades, and Rikudo had a respectable amount of, considering his age. Sitting upright but obviously bleary from the previous day's events, Naruto slowly came to, and began sealing his things away into his equipment scroll. They had a light breakfast of rations and water before taking off, this time Naruto firmly insisting on making the journey himself. Approving, Rikudo turned and leapt to the trees with Jiraiya and Naruto in his wake. After a few hours, Rikudo signaled them to stop, and turned to them with a serious expression. "We're around a half-hour's travel distance from the royal palace. Naruto, best behavior constantly. Don't relax. Before you complain, we're technically in friendly territory, however." He paused, making sure he had Naruto's full attention. "We're also under great danger. There will be forces at play here that want us gone so that we don't cause any more trouble. They could be external or internal, be from the village, or from Daimyo-sama's own court. Naruto, I'm really serious here. I need you to stay with me at all times, or Jiraiya here. If you see any hot springs, run off and find me immediately. You're a sensor, so you can find my chakra," Rikudo instructed, gripping Naruto's shoulder to make sure he grasped the importance of what he was saying. "I understand, and Sen." Naruto was solemn. He was old enough to understand that as the possible last known Uzumaki, their lives were in great peril out in the open like this. It made him inch closer to Rikudo without intending to. Satisfied, Rikudo turned to Jiraiya for his input. "Your thoughts, Jiraiya?" he asked stiffly. He may have detested the man, but he had to respect his superior experience in situations such as this. Jiraiya thought for a moment. "You're fairly spot on, actually, although I would advise discretion, especially when pointing factors back to the village. Some may interpret that in ways that you may not like the results of. Rikuto nodded, accepting the criticism. Then let's go, gentlemen. Daimyo-sama is awaiting our arrival. Naruto, let's change. Use the physical henge. Well, not that you have much choice yet. Rikuto sheepishly chuckled at Naruto's deadpan glare. Inge no jutsu. Rikuto and Naruto muttered simultaneously, both shrouded by twin puffs of chakra smoke, that when they cleared, revealed Naruto in a simple dark red kimono, violet obi, and with the Uzumaki clan symbol on the back in black. Rikuto wore much the same, albeit with a formal white haori similar to his usual one, also with the Uzumaki clan symbol on the back in black, and his sword now rode on his right hip, secured by the similarly violet obi and completed with black traditional geta and white tabi. Jiraiya whistled at the change. Looking good, brats. Let's go. I'm over 20 years old. I'm not a brat. Besides, have you forgotten who the commanding officer is? And another thing, do not talk unless spoken to. You carry a high reputation, especially in Hai no Kuni as one of the Densetsu no Sannin. However, this is not concerning you. I've dealt with my fair share of politics before I came to Konoha, as well as the crap I've had to deal with as clan head once I arrived. I would appreciate it if you would comply. Rikuto turned away and vanished, leaving Jiraiya and Naruto to catch up. As soon as they'd done so, Jiraiya studied Rikuto intently. His demeanor had shifted somewhat over the time of the trip, and he'd been stumped as to why. The young man's icy, bitter sarcasm was gradually giving way to civility and indifference, and a hint of respect. He was confused, because he'd done nothing of the sort to try and patch things up. Perhaps to get any closer to either of the Uzumaki cousins, he'd have to do just that, but now mid-mission was not the time, especially during an A-rank mission practically riding on his reputation and the fear it induced whilst not on the levels of his student, the Yandame Hokage. It was still potent enough. Just as Rikuto had said earlier, a half-hour's travel soon found them at the outer entrance to the palace proper. Slowing down to walking speed as to not arouse suspicion of attack, the group made their, much slower, to Rikuto and Jiraiya's chagrin, way to the gates. Presenting their papers and signing forms, Rikuto got them through and was directed to the guest wing, where they would be met by an escort to see the daimyo that afternoon. Until then, Uzumaki-sama, your party is free to roam the grounds, as long as you do not enter any forbidden areas. They will be marked as such. Good day. The guard waved them off and turned back with a grunt to the next group to process. Putting his arms behind his head, Jiraiya took in the familiar sights. He'd last been here on a clandestine mission to inspect some seals that a patrol reported that looked different. He'd stumbled upon a very cleverly concealed explosive array and had to disable and remove it during the night so that rumor wouldn't spread. Rikuto simply had his Ryuringen activated under a Jinjutsu to observe and remember the layout and patterns that the guards were moving in. His eyes flickering from side to side, Tomo spinning slowly, committing every detail to memory. Seeing this, Jiraiya had to fight off a smirk. This guy was beginning to seem like he was worth his salt as a shinobi after all. I suppose seeing as we're shinobi who can actually use sealing scrolls, there's nothing to deposit in our rooms. Well, might as well look. Rikuto changed his mind, leisurely strolling towards the castle, and eventually inside. The palace looked absolutely monstrous in size, looming above them in all its royal grace, but when one walked inside, it was absolutely dwarfing, capitalizing on one's sense that they were but an ant in comparison. Floored with polished marble, the majestic foyer rose for several stories, allowing glimpses of the floors above. Through this space hung many chandeliers, glistening in the morning light, majestically keeping the air of modest decorum. Shaking his head, Naruto tore his eyes from the sight to run after Rikuto, earning a chastising glance for not keeping up. Soon they rounded a corner and met a set of red, carpet-lined staircases that ascended the height of the foyer and were visible on the scores of floors above. After walking up 3 flights, they arrived at a signposted guest wing, where they found their room, and not a moment after the door had closed, Rikuto flashed through a series of hand seals and slapped both hands to the floor. Wow! Both hands, Rikuto and I? Must be complex, Naruto chirped, his legs swinging from the high bed he'd perched himself on. Rikuto just smiled. Uzumaki fuinjutsu ryu, kokwanjio no jutsu, Uzumaki sealing style. Bringer of darkness technique, he intoned, making the snake seal to finish the technique. Now, he grunted, getting up. No none will be able to see, hear, or even feel vibrations of what happens inside this room. However, innate sensors like Naruto and I could still have a pretty good idea on chakra signatures, that being the one weakness of this seal. Rikudo explained, looking around the moderately lavish room, decked out with 3 beds, each separated by a screen, and the joint area with a rather nice-looking table and cushions. You used the name Kokwangyo in that technique, right? That's actually Jiraiya started to inform the redhead, but he held up a hand. I'm well aware of the Third Hokage's infamous genjutsu. However, this particular seal predates his generation entirely. It's completely coincidental. However, my strongest privacy seal in my arsenal so far. Rikudo overrode him, waving off his concerns. Speaking of your arsenal, what type of seals do you specialize in? My student, Namikaze Minato, specialized in Jikuken ninjutsu, space-time techniques, whereas I specialize in Kekijutsu, barrier techniques. Jiraiya explained, studying the redhead. Then I guess I'm similar to your student then. One of my goals is to create my own version of the Hiraishin. However, I'm still missing some tweaks to make it less likely to tear you a new dimension hole. Rikudo gritted his teeth. It infuriates me. Gives me the right shits, it does. He complained, collapsing onto a bed. Intrigued, Jiraiya sat next to him and rolled out a scroll and took out some ink supplies. Naruto, instantly seeing that they were going to be using fuinjutsu, scrabbled over and sat cross-legged next to Jiraiya. Hey Rikudo nii. Jiraiya's got sealing stuff out, he called, waving his arms about. Hearing the word sealing, like a true Uzumaki, he sat bolt upright and scanned the room. Who sealed what now? Naruto burst out laughing. You do that every time, Anayasan. You're hilarious. He barked with laughter, rolling on the floor, oblivious to Rikudo's deadpan glare. When you can get beyond conjuring a wall of thin chakra, you little shit, you'll begin to understand my bond with my one true love, seals. Rikudo matter-of-factly explained, now sitting in a cross-legged pose across the large scroll from Jiraiya. What's this for? He asked, somehow feeling more comfortable with the man, given his common obsession with sealing. A common ground is a good bridge over hostility. Jiraiya motioned towards the ink and brush. Go on, show me your version of Minato-kun's jutsu. Don't worry about me stealing it, I already know the basics of his technique. I just don't have the skill to pull it off, not even close. But I might be able to give you a second perspective. Jiraiya shrugged. It's your call. Rikudo studied the man for a moment, even going so far as to consciously narrow his mind's eye of the Kagura ability in on him. Instantly, Jiraiya felt Rikudo's chakra all around him, circling, watching, and judging, and in that same instant it vanished. Rikudo nodded, satisfied. You can't lie when I'm using that ability. It's probably on par with the QB's negative emotion sensing, actually. Now, my own version, well, if anything, I want to name my own technique after the first one, developed by none other than my other idol, the Third Hokage. He was a space-time master, the creator of the Edo Tensei Hiraishin, amongst other many awe-inspiring techniques. If possible, I admire him more than the fourth. Rikudo professed, reaching over to grab the brush, only to be interrupted by a knock on the door. Uzumaki-sama, I'm here to escort you to the dais. Daimyo-sama will see you shortly. I shall wait here until you are ready, sir. Came the voice of a demure young man, yet carried the haughtiness of the royal court well enough. In a flash, Jiraiya rolled up the scroll and stashed away the supplies. Rikudo simply rose, refreshed his henge, which Naruto followed suit, and sighed. Well, here it is.
Come, Naruto.
Together, we'll remind the world what they rightly feared. The Uzumaki are back. Rikudo's grin grew wild. And this time, there's no way we're going down. The 3 Konoha shinobi stood assembled before the almighty royal court of the High no Kuni daimyo, mostly managing to maintain their composures. Jiraiya had been in far more intimidating situations before and thus stood behind the 2 Uzumaki with his arms crossed. Naruto, with all his worldly innocence, simply marveled at the amount of people, but reserved a careful glance or two for the daimyo himself. Uzumaki Rikudo, however, stood somewhat at attention, with his arms crossed behind his back, looking as stony as he was anxious. I bid the court and Daimyo-sama himself a good morning. I will now formally introduce my party. Behind me is one that needs no introduction. As for the young one beside me, he is my cousin and clansman, son of Uzumaki Kushina, Uzumaki Naruto. As for myself, I am the grandson of the Shodai Uzukage, Uzumaki Katsuru. I am the rightful clan head of the Uzumaki. I am Uzumaki Rakudo. Rakudo grandiosely informed the court, sweeping his violet eyes over the arrangement of nobles and officials alike. Silence oppressed the room, blanketing it with a thick air of anticipation. After an endless moment, the daimyo finally cleared his throat. This court is bearing the weight of decades that have passed since your clan has last graced us, Uzumaki Dano. Rakudo bowed once more, and I feel it with the lack of my clan, Daimyo-sama. I aim to find my clansmen once more, and if possible establish the clan in Konoha, as my mother village once had very close ties with Konoha. Rakudo straightened. This time his eyes seemed to possess an ethereal glow. The daimyo simply arched an eyebrow at Rakudo's statement. You are a very bold young man, you know? Quite like the Uzumaki I remember. Very fitting that you should talk like they once did. The daimyo paused and seemed to notice Naruto for the first time, which raised the hackles on Rakudo's neck. And what about you, young Uzumaki? How do you introduce yourself to the court? Naruto glanced to Rakudo in search of what to do, violet eyes pleading. Rakudo nodded and gave a small smile, to which Naruto turned around and spoke timidly. Good morning. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, cousin to Uzumaki Rakudo. I like sealing, ninjutsu, and spending time with Rakuto Nizan. It's a pleasure to meet you all. He looked around with a small grin and stepped back beside Rakudo. The daimyo nodded, seemingly appeased. Your family tradition seems to have been accompanied by awareness of the severity of the situation in your cousin, Uzumaki Dano. However, your petition bears great importance and weight in your favor. The ties between Yuzu no Kuni and Hai no Kuni and the respective villages within those countries cannot be ignored. As your home village regretfully lies in ruins, I, the daimyo of Hai no Kuni, do grant your clan asylum and indefinite residency in Hai no Kuni, and do support the Third Hokage sponsorship for your clan to return to the village. I do trust that I will see more of you in the future, clan head. The daimyo nodded solemnly, indicating that they were dismissed. Bowing deeply, the Uzumaki and their bodyguard left the chamber, and Rakudo immediately headed to their room, alarming Jiraiya and thus Naruto. Rakudo and I, what's wrong? Naruto queried, worriedly looking up at Rakudo's furrowed brow. Although I set up a very obvious monitoring seal, someone's been in our room. Nothing's been touched, but the message is clear enough. We're not safe here. Jiraiya, we've done our part here. It would fit in with the attitude of previous Uzumaki to up and leave now, wouldn't it? He replied tersely, spinning around to meet Jiraiya's stony look. When? Rakudo closed his eyes for a moment as seals on the surfaces of the room became visible as they glowed, and then retracted back into where Rakudo was standing. Right after we left the chamber. I received notification of it as soon as I got within range of the seal. Rakudo replied, now opening his eyes and glaring at the floor, as if it was to blame. Jiraiya shook his head. At least nothing was touched. I'm assuming you set a secondary seal to detect that, and possibly, knowing your heritage, a tertiary seal to apprehend them in some embarrassing or painful way, perhaps even both. Jiraiya accused the redhead with a knowing look, to which said redhead grinned unabashedly. Of course. Considering that, then yes, I would say it's a wise decision to retreat for now. Jiraiya sighed. As much as I hate turning tail, this just isn't the right environment for a fight, regardless of the nature. And you Uzumaki sure aren't possessed of the finesse needed for such a fight here. Rakudo scoffed. Damn right we aren't. If I fight with a bang or several. He waved his hand dismissively. But that doesn't change the fact that we need to get out of here, and now, preferably. Jiraiya frowned, worry slowly seeping into his voice. We don't want to risk either of you two. As far as we know, you're the only Uzumaki left. Silence reigned for a moment, until Rikudo began resealing their extra belongings, and then stashing that away in a pouch. You needn't remind me, Jiraiya. Let's move, we leave immediately. The daimyo won't miss us. He's too preoccupied with the sluts waiting in his bath, Rikudo said with no small amount of scorn. Soon enough the front gates came into view, and quickly signing out of the capital, they took to the trees, but not before Rikudo muttered, "By gods, I hope he's ready."
Tetsu, I, Inu, Mi, Saru, Ushi, Ne, Inu, I, U, Mu, Tetsu, Ushi, Ne, Ushi, Hitsuji, Torai, Tetsu, Saru, Hitsuji, Tora, Ushi, Mi.
Uzumaki fuinjutsu Ryu. Time skip no jutsu. Two redheads were currently engaged in a vicious whirlwind of kicks, punches, jabs and spins, both using the deadly Uzumaki taijutsu style, the Uzukin, or whirlpool fist. Suddenly feeling the usage of chakra, the duo abruptly split, jabbing chakra-laced feet to the ground to rapidly vacate the clearing, which was then filled with spreading seals, some of which shot out wood, others fire, lightning and one a jet of hissing water. The first, and bigger one, wiped his forehead with a towel, sighing in contentment. "I like it how you're big enough, old enough and ugly enough now to spar with me. Gives me a chance to actually tap into my chakra supply." He was slightly above average height, standing at 6 feet 1 inch with his hair now shoulder blade length, with 2 bangs framing his face, and of a lean build. Uzumaki Rikudo didn't garner his intimidation factor from his build alone. No, it was his eyes. Nowadays he had his glowing green Ryuringen eyes active near constantly, claiming that having it active was like a normal person constantly streaming a B-rank jutsu, that it was a good chakra exercise for him. Now wearing black shinobi boots, dark gray NBU-style pants with dark green bandages around his ankles and lower legs, a dark green long-sleeved undershirt and thin chainmail, and doing away with his old black muscle shirt, now wore the flak jacket of a Konoha jonin with his usual black sleeveless haori, with green slit marks adorning the end, and the Uzumaki crest in white on his back. Completing the outfit were black combat gloves, with the plates bearing the kanji for amplify. Rikudo's companion, however, simply huffed in response, absolutely drained by his fellow redhead. "No wonder I'm the only one that you can use your chakra with. I'm the only one aside from Ero Sennin who can defend ourselves with barrier seals," he whined, collapsing on his back. Uzumaki Naruto had also changed, albeit much more significantly. He now stood at 5 feet 2 inches, being slightly taller than his classmates at the academy, from which he was due to graduate the next day at the normal age of 12. However, his birthday was still yet to come in October. To celebrate, Rikudo had gone all out and bought a new outfit for his cousin, much to the latter's mixed joy and revulsion. The cause for revulsion? Hardly any orange in sight. He now wore identical items to Rikudo from the waist down, except the bandages were a darkened, burnt orange, much to Naruto's delight, a black t-shirt with the Uzumaki crest on both sleeves, and a light chest and back armor, similar to the ones that the ANBU used, and had a similar set of combat gloves to Rikudo, except his bore no seals. "Are you ready, Naruto-kun? It's time." Rikudo crossed his arms as Naruto looked up suddenly. "Wait, when we go see Hokagejiji about your jutsu?" he asked excitedly. Rikudo grinned widely. "Yep, I'm pretty sure I've got the mechanics right. I just want to look at Naidame-sama's jutsu from the scroll to make sure it's right. If it is, then Konoha will have a red flash." Naruto looked on at his evilly grinning cousin, and couldn't help but think back to the countless nights Rikudo and I had spent in his study, poring over countless reams of seals and formally humming and tooting as he worked. "Okay, let's get going, Tabeo." Naruto somehow regained his energy to spring up and run into the house to get presentable for an audience with the Hokage. Rikudo, however, made sure that he had all of the components ready for his own Horatian variant, which when marked took the form of a down-pointing arrow, with the tail crossed over schematic scrolls, and sealing supplies to make any necessary adjustments. "Uzumaki Rikudo, here to see Hokage-sama," Rikudo murmured to the small receptionist that only looked up at the sound of a voice. "Oh, of course, Uzumaki-sama. He's waiting for you. Head on through," she said, not without a blush as Rikudo's now violet eyes flicked back in her direction. Rikudo paused, and at a glance from Naruto he smiled reassuringly. It's okay. Just a little nervous. Naruto just flashed a grin. It's okay. Even if he won't let you see it, I think it's better anyway, he declared, jabbing at the large double doors with his thumb. Rikudo just smiled and ruffled Naruto's hair, earning his ire. Thanks, Squirt. Pushing open the doors, he waited until Naruto had walked in after him until he closed them, and waited for Sarutobi to activate the extensive privacy seals in the office that Mito had installed herself. Now mere steps away from the Hokage, Uzumaki Rikudo bowed deeply.
Hokage-sama.
Sarutobi inclined his head with a fond smile. My favorite Uzumaki are here. Naruto cocked his head to the side with a frown. We're your only Uzumaki. Giving Naruto a light whack over the back of his head and ignoring his indignant cry, Rikudo made eye contact with the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I come to you now as not only clan head of the Uzumaki, but as a student of fuinjutsu and an avid admirer of all powerful practitioners before me, Nidaime and Yondaime Hokages included. It is with this that I humbly request access to either Hokage's notes on the Hiraishin no Jutsu. If you harbor concerns that I will simply copy the technique, I have my own progress here with me. I only aim to patch possible flaws in my technique before I attempt it. I am aware that Namikaze Minato had access to the Nidaime Hokage's notes and thus created his own variant. I aim to do the same, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi's eyes widened at hearing this, but narrowed at Rikudo's last mention of the Nidaime. How do you know this, Uzumaki-kun? It could be that he managed to recreate the jutsu on his own. Rikudo just knowingly smiled. He hit the same block that I did, that only a master of spacetime sealing like Senju Tobarama could ever hope to fix. The mechanics to return the user to our plane in the same sequence, without the acceleration factor. I'm sure he approached you with the same problem. Sarutobi sat back in his chair and assessed the young redhead for a time. After it almost became unbearable for Rikudo to wait, the Hokage simply smiled ruefully. You speak of seals just like Mito-sama did. Then again, Uzumaki will be Uzumaki, I suppose. Yes, you're right, Minato-kun did approach me with the same problem and the same request. And as I did with him, I shall do the same with you, however on two conditions. Hiruzen nailed Rikudo with a hard glare and his Ki rose to match, making Rikudo sweat, but he projected his own around him to shield Naruto from it, who was shaking terribly. What are they, Hokage-sama? Rikudo swallowed. The god of shinobi stood up and faced the window, staring at his beloved village, the Ki and pressure evaporating as quickly as it came, and Rikudo dropped to Naruto to check on him. However, at the sound of Sarutobi's voice, his head snapped around. I've seen Minato do so much killing with that jutsu that it left him hollowed out each time he used it. Fill the gaping holes in your soul with love, Rikudo. Use it to protect not only Konoha, but the will of fire. The second, you are now the guardian of this accursed jutsu. You needn't show me your schematics. Only those who actually come across the problem have completed the seals properly, as Tobarama-sensei told me. He knew that future fuinjutsu practitioners may seek to acquire his jutsu. Sarutobi vanished, and a few long moments later, returned with a saddened look and the fabled forbidden scroll of seals in his arms. Rikudo had to restrain himself from rushing over at the sight of his dreams. Instead, the aged Hokage cleared his desk slowly, taking care not to disturb his paperwork processes, and laid the scroll out, unfurling it, skimming past scores of kenjutsu, until he reached the Hiraishin. Making several one-handed seals, he tapped the matrix in a staccato rhythm, until a fat scroll emerged. Grimly taking the scroll, he locked eyes with the Uzumaki before handing him the Hiraishin scroll. I, the Sandaime Hokage, hereby transfer custody of the Hiraishin no Jutsu to the closest living relative of the original owner, Senju Tobarama, Uzumaki Rikudo. You are now free to do what you wish with it. I am not nearly proficient enough to deal with that jutsu, so I now entrust it to you. Perhaps, in time, Naruto may too learn it. After all, it is also his father's jutsu. I'm too old for this shit. You two are dismissed. With twin bows, the Uzumaki clansman left the Hokage's office, leaving him to return the scroll to its place. So, Rikudo Nii, what's wrong with your jutsu? Naruto asked, hanging from the ceiling behind Rikudo, as to not interrupt the massive array of scrolls. ink pots, brushes, and other sealing paraphernalia scattered around the room. Naruto knew better than to interrupt Rikudo and I when he was in this sealing frenzies. It's exactly what I thought it was. Tobirama had this array sequenced in this way, where I have it. That's it, Rikudo exclaimed, fist pumping. I've done it. Well, that remains to be seen, he muttered, crouching once more to rewrite the full array. Memorizing it, he pulled out 2 blank paper tags and imprinted the marker seal with his chakra onto both. Then, tying one to a kunai, he threw it out the open window and placed the other onto a small cleared section of floor space.
Kage Bunshin no Jutsu.
He snapped, mentally ordering the clone to perform the Hiration and then return. Shortly after, a red flash could be seen from the window, and a retching sound, followed lastly by a popping sound of the clone dispelling. Rikudo's eyes widened from the clone's memories. Ah, so the threshold for this algorithm was off, with then set off that indicating. Naruto sighed as his cousin trailed off, lost in the world of sealing for the next few hours at least, or until he managed to perform a working teleportation. After a while and a few dissected and warped clones later, Naruto gave up on waiting for his cousin and decided to go upstairs and go over his equipment for tomorrow. Best to be prepared, packing sealing supplies, kunai, shuriken, pre-made Uzumaki explosive tags, and other supplies that he sealed in various scrolls, as he didn't know what kind of test that he'd have to face the next day. Some hours later, as the sun was beginning to descend, Naruto startled as Rikudo triumphantly let out a "fuck yeah" to the heavens, presumably completing a successful use of the Flying Thunder God technique. Deciding against his better judgment to investigate, Naruto made his way downstairs and out into the backyard, only to be assaulted by the sight of near-simultaneous red flashes at sealing tags scattered around the backyard. "Woo! You got it, Rikudo and I," Naruto shouted, ecstatic that his cousin could now use the, in Naruto's humble opinion, wicked cool Hiration. Rikudo stopped the technique, coming to a halt and his knees in front of Naruto, panting heavily, and to Naruto's senses, unbelievably low on chakra. Damn. I didn't think that abusing it like this could be so intensive. Perhaps it's my unfamiliarity with it. I suppose that can only improve over time. Damn, I only have as much chakra left as a Chunin does. Sweet holy log. Rikudo mumbled then cursed avidly, leaving Naruto to sweat drop. Rikudo and I, didn't you say we'd train today? Naruto timidly asked, crouching to peek under his cousin's red hair that had fallen over his face, only to see a grin. Sure, I want at least 8 out of 10 for both kunai and shuriken on those targets, and I want a Kage Bunshin, Henge, and Kawarimi done in 6 seconds. Go, you little shrimp. Rikudo sat up and barked his orders, leaving Naruto scrambling for his equipment, lest he attract his cousin's ire. As anyone worth their salt in regards to clan knowledge goes, a pissed-off Uzumaki is a very dangerous Uzumaki. After practicing his marksmanship for roughly 20 minutes or so with last-minute corrections from Rikudo, Naruto finally moved on to performing the Academy 3 first with precision, then with speed. Satisfied with those areas, Rikudo held up a hand to stop him. The Academy also allows a 4th technique, a family or clan technique to get extra credit. Just to be sure, he added, upon seeing Naruto's indignant look, I want you to use a basic Uzumaki barrier seal. At his, Naruto cocked his head to the side in thought. Like the Gyaku Kekai, reverse barrier? Naruto asked, still mulling over which barrier to use from his modest arsenal. Rikudo's eyebrow rose at that. You've stabilized it, have you? Good work. Yeah, that will give them something to gossip about, that's for sure. He then had Naruto write out 5 tags, each capable of erecting the barrier, in quick succession before he was satisfied. Alright Naruto, now on to taijutsu. We practiced this earlier, but I want you to keep it up. Yuzukin, go! Rikudo ordered, readying himself for his little cousin's onslaught, which the latter happily decided to wail on Rikudo, using his smaller size and speed to his advantage. But as always, Rikudo and I always dodges or blocks every single one of my hits. I've never been able to land a hit on him once. Naruto ground his teeth impatiently. Eventually, after another 20 minutes, Naruto slumped back on his rear, panting, whilst Rikudo stood back, wiping the sweat from his brow, only lightly out of breath. You're doing awesomely at that, Naruto. Just need to work on your succession hits towards the end of the combinations and your power, and you'll be a fearsome opponent in taijutsu. Rikudo exclaimed, much to Naruto's embarrassment. Come on, Squirt. It's almost time to get dinner ready. Go on and clean up, we're having leftovers because I can't be bothered cooking and you can't be bothered washing up. After that, I'll tell you another story about Yuzu. Rikudo yawned, stretching his arms as Naruto chirped an affirmative and scrambled inside to get cleaned up. He loved stories about Yuzu. A small, perhaps small for his age, little boy ran through the heavily populated forest, ducking, weaving, long jumping and rolling in amongst the impossibly high-reaching denizens, using their limbs as springboards and smoothly avoiding others. He knew this forest better than he knew himself. The different parts of the forest held different families of trees and plants, and he knew them all, which ones you could rely on to heal you, and which ones you could rely on for aid in less desirable interactions. The redhead seemed to flow with the movement of the denizens of the forest as they went about their business. Slow to the human eye but moving, breathing, living creatures nonetheless. The boy loved how the forest was alive, and he was certain he could feel its chakra, as well as he could feel his own, and the signatures of his clan, far off into the distance, possibly starting to get worried. He often went on forays like this, they should know, damn it. As he thought of this, a wondrous smile crept onto his face. There was always this serene, isolated cave system that he'd stumbled upon once before, but never been able to find it since. It had this strange feeling, though, like it had someone else's chakra inside it. Perhaps it was powerful fuinjutsu at work? The redhead rubbed his hands at the mere thought. He loved fuinjutsu more than anything else. With that thought in mind, he expanded his senses and was surprised to locate the strange feeling. Rather near, pulse quickening, he snapped open his eyes to scan around, and before long, found a large stone block, overcome with time and the creepers it brings. Vines and roots had taken it as their own. Edging closer, the boy examined the surface, but deflated when he could find no fuinjutsu markings on it. Instead, he found a stairwell, descending deeply. A dark maw opened wide, daring the redhead to descend and find its secrets, possibly swallowing him whole. Clutching his hands into fists, he threw aside all abandon and charged down the stairs, taking no time to admire the gaping recesses where artifacts possibly once resided, long lost to history. After a few minutes of running, a panting heap that resembled a boy found himself at the base of the huge staircase, only to see a huge, absolutely colossal chamber before him. Simply, it was the biggest indoor space the boy had ever seen. Could fit Yuzuzyokure in it and still have room to spare. It was then he noticed the equally colossal and impressive ceiling array etched into the stone floor. Taking a moment to assess it, time flew by as he observed a cacophony of intermingling processes that wove around each other, exchanged chakra, information and conversions, and time lost all meaning as the boy suddenly found himself at the epicenter of the ceiling matrix. Uzumaki instincts screamed at him not to approach it, but suddenly quieted as he assessed the arrays around the center, just big enough for a person to sit in the lotus position. Overcome by curiosity, he sat down and let his chakra leak into the seal. Watching in awe as the room was lit up gradually as his glowing forest green chakra flooded the seals. He barely had time to take in a breath as Rikudo brought his hands together with a slap, startling Naruto slightly on the lounge in front of the fireplace. Come on, sleepyhead. It's late enough as it is. You've got a genin exam tomorrow to ace, don't you? Go on, Squirt, up to bed. He murmured, giving his cousin a bear hug, much to his annoyance, but mumbled a good night and began to trek up the stairs, only to freeze as Rikudo called up to him. And Uzumaki Naruto, if I find you awake with that illumination seal and studying those barriers again, I'll lock you in one. Do you hear me, young man? After hearing his cousin close his bedroom door, Rikudo sighed with a smile.
Fucking brat.
Naruto made sure to turn up early to the academy. Well, if he was to be completely honest, he would tell you that Rikudo and I dragged him downstairs by his foot and demanded he get ready. But that's beside the point. He edged his way into the classroom, narrowly avoiding two fangirls squabbling over who got to sit next to their heartthrob, Uchiha Sasuke. Scoffing at their behavior, Naruto sidled over and plunked himself down next to Sasuke, who only deigned to glance in his direction to acknowledge his presence. Such chakra, I'd be a fool not to acknowledge that. Sasuke snuck another furtive glance at the redhead next to him. Suddenly, Sasuke was broken out of his reverie by the sound of Haruno Sakura slamming her fist down onto the desk in front of whom he knew to be Uzumaki Naruto. "Oi, Naruto baka! Who the hell do you think you are? Sitting next to my Sasuke-kun?" she screeched, making anyone in the near vicinity wince in pain. Naruto simply reached up and patted her on the arm. "Sakura-san, you're being noisy again. Be quiet." Sakura obviously went to retort, but found that she could no longer move her mouth, veins bulging in her head. She attempted to hit the smug redhead only to find searing pain shoot through the offending limb. Sasuke was simply stunned. He of course knew about fuinjutsu, but to see a real Uzumaki, and by real, one wielding the same ability as the Uzumaki in his clan's archives. To apply a seal by touch, he gazed at the seal, a pulsating blue on Sakura's arm, where Naruto had patted it earlier. "You have no right to say where I sit, Sakura-san. I sat here first. There's heaps of other places to sit. Now go away." Naruto sighed, tapping the seal once more to dispel it. Sakura rubbed her arm but spared Naruto a growl as she stalked away, defeated once more. Naruto turned back around to find Sasuke giving him a new look of appraisal. "Uchiha Sasuke," he said, abruptly holding out his hand. Naruto took a look at it and then studied the Uchiha in front of him, surprised that only now did he formally introduce himself, shaking his head. He took the hand regardless. "Name's Uzumaki Naruto. Don't wear it out." He stuck his tongue out, but stiffened suddenly, and whipped around to face the front of the room as their homeroom sensei, Umino Irika, used his big head technique to forcefully get his class attention. "I hope you've all prepared for today. Here's a brief overview of how we're going to test you. First off, we'll have the theoretical exam, followed by a 15-minute break, then onto the marksmanship section, and the taijutsu examination, followed by a 45-minute break. After that, there'll be the ninjutsu portion of the exam, where you will also be offered the option of a fourth technique to gain credit. After that, you'll be notified straight away if you've passed or not. And if you have, you must return here in a week's time for team placements. Mizuki-san, would you please hand out the exams?" And with that, the genin exams had begun. Hokage's office. Hiruzen was enjoying a nice cup of tea, staring out over the village that he loved so much. A quirky smile tugged at a corner of his mouth when he recalled that today was the genin exams, and where his young Uzumaki was bound to graduate. Enjoying the silence and a rare break from the latest strain of the Paperworkius succius virus, his peace was interrupted by a flash of red that briefly illuminated the daylit room even further, the subsequent calm only interrupted by the swaying of a seal tag attached to the roof by a tri-pronged kunai. "Hokage-sama, you summoned me?" Uzumaki Rikuto knelt in a pose eerily reminiscent of that of Anbu. Sighing, Hiruzen turned to address his subordinate. "Rise, Rikuto-kun. Yes, I wanted to inform you about your requested additional blood test. The results have been given to me." Rikuto cocked his head to the side. "Now why on earth would they do that?" Hiruzen studied the redhead closely. "You're probably wondering why I had to handle it, when you could have easily been summoned by the hospital staff and the results delivered to you directly. However, that would involve several people having access to what the director deemed to be highly classified information on a military asset, i.e. you."
Sit down, Rikuto-kun.
"We have much to discuss and so very little time. We will also be joined by two other individuals towards the end of our discussion." Hiruzen gestured towards the guest seat, which Rikuto took with no small amount of apprehension. On the other hand, back at the academy, Naruto was having no such troubles. The exam in front of him was initially shrouded in a genjutsu. The chakra used to power it Naruto had no qualms about sensing, and traced it back to Mizuki. Shrugging it off as nothing, he dispelled the genjutsu with a burst of chakra, alerting Irika, but continued on as if nothing had happened. After a while, Irika also dismissed it. Now that he had a clear chance of reading it, he slumped in defeat. "Rikuto and I will kill me if I don't ace the shit out of this. How could I not, though? He has me studying this stuff as much as he does fuinjutsu," he thought, getting to printing his answers out, nearly as neat as the printed words, due to his hours poured into fuinjutsu training. Mizuki inwardly snarled as he felt the Kyuubi brat dispel his carefully placed genjutsu. How on earth he'd known there was beyond the man, but he resolved to find another way to get his goal, or to just cut out the middleman and do it himself. You could only ensure a job was done properly by doing it yourself, of course. After being dismissed for the short break, which most of his peers used to commiserate on how badly they'd done on the exam, Naruto took a different route and decided to get to know his chakra better under a tree outside. Rikudo and Ai had said that because his chakra felt dense, he should, in theory, be able to use his mother's chakra chain's ability, like he could. He sat down in the lotus position, but only got as far as calming himself before feeling another presence nearby. Cracking open one eye to peer at the intruder, he saw the raven from earlier. Nodding to him, he muttered, "Uchiha-san, what brings you here? I didn't really feel like talking to anyone else, and besides, you seem like you know what you're doing. A change from our peers." Sasuke trailed off after a while, obviously uncomfortable this far into a social interaction. Sighing at his classmate's inadequacy, he gestured to the ground next to him. "Sit, so I won't hit you with the seals." Naruto brusquely pointed to the ground now, and after a confused Sasuke had taken his seat, Naruto took out a seal tag from earlier, placed it on the ground and held a half-tiger hand seal to activate it. Streams of spidery fuinjutsu spread out from the tag, forming a pentagon, and from there, a light gray barrier shimmered, indicating the seal had been fully activated, and not a moment too soon. Ino and Sakura had then face-planted into the barrier, and due to it being the Gyaku Kekai, reverse barrier, they were then sent sailing away with the force from their own faces. Naruto sat back against the tree and took a breath. "How's the serenity?" he mumbled, stretching his neck. "Using that seal tag was worth the result, I think." Sasuke could only close his mouth by sheer force of will. His Uchiha pride demanded it, of course, and proved enough to restrain the laughter. This time, Uzumaki Naruto would prove a pain in the ass if he wanted to preserve his image, he decided. However, after hearing Iruka's call for the next portion, Naruto simply picked up the now useless seal tag, dispelling the barrier. He then ambled over to where Iruka was calling the students over to the range to test their weapons usage, followed by a suddenly mute Uchiha. "All right, everyone. Line up in alphabetical order. You should know this well enough. We've been at it for years," Iruka called, making hurrying motions with his free hand, the other occupied by a loaded clipboard. Soon enough, it came to be Naruto's turn, with a nervous grin at Sasuke who cracked a semblance of a smile in return. He threw his lot of shuriken with easy flicks of his wrists, scoring a modest 8 out of 10. He then took out tri-pronged kunai much to the shock of Iruka, but proved to be a false alarm as Naruto simply threw them, getting a perfect score of 10 out of 10. Moving quickly to collect his kunai, he scurried out of the way and opted to sit back and tune out, idly watching the other students try their aim. However, when it came to Sasuke's turn, Naruto perked up and craned his neck up to see his somewhat friend try, getting 9 out of 10 with his shuriken and 10 out of 10 with his kunai. After lying down next to Nara Shikamaru and watching the clouds for some time, he jumped up excitedly as his name was called, presumably for the taijutsu portion. Upon seeing that he was to face off against Inuzuka Kiba, the second ranked in taijutsu, he paled a little, but steeled himself upon imagining Rikudo and Ai's glowing fist if he chickened out. Sliding his right foot to the left and bending his knee slightly, bringing his arms up to float easily at his sides, Naruto steadied his breathing and chakra, ready to strike. Iruka looked at Naruto closely. "So he's using the Uzuken, huh? I've only ever seen it used once, by his guardian, Uzumaki Rikudo." Poor Ebisu got up his nose. "One hospital trip later and I got his point. Regardless, it's a devastating style if used by a master." Naruto first offered the symbol of confrontation, and Kiba readily returned it. "Ready, set, go," Iruka called, stepping out of the ring to observe the spar, as Kiba shot forward with a straight hook, not thinking the modest boy could do much against his onslaught. He hadn't beforehand. Although much to his surprise, Naruto ducked under, spun, and lashed out with a brutal spinning kick to Kiba's exposed midsection, sending him sailing and rolling out of the ring. Naruto simply spent the rest of his momentum to spin back to standing, and making the sign of reconciliation, he walked over to Kiba to make sure he was okay, and after lending him an arm to move away, the next fight began, but not before Irika ran another cursory glance over the redhead helping his classmate. Wow, Rikudo-san must be a competent teacher. He's got Naruto to not only use his stature to his advantage, but must have trained his physical strength too. That was a smoothly executed kick, and it was definitely a mastered Yuzuken move. Hokage's office. After setting up his strongest privacy seal, the Uzumaki fuinjutsu Ryu, Kokwanjyo no Jutsu, Uzumaki sealing style, bringer of darkness technique, Rikudo took his seat across the desk from Hiruzen, his pulse quickening. What is it, Hokage-sama? What did they reveal? Rikudo asked, glancing at the sealed manila envelope on the desk. Sighing, Hiruzen opened it and laid out the contents for Rikudo to see, which elicited a stifled gasp from the redhead. Forgive my morbid humor, but I think my target is growing beyond the size of my back. Hiruzen allowed himself a chuckle. You remind me of Tobirama-sensei, sometimes. But yes, this is accurate. I was there when I demanded that the results be recalculated. Like you, I was incredulous. Look over them again. Rikudo peered at the sheets again. Name, Uzumaki Rikudo. Age 24. Rank Jonin. Limited results due to insufficient records. Great-grandparents, Uzumaki Mito, Senju Hashirama. Maternal grandparents, Uzumaki Katsuru, Uzumaki Mitsuko. Parents, Uzumaki Naoki, Uzumaki Emi. Bloodline limits, Mind's Eye of the Kagura-in release. Latent bloodline limits, would release. Rikudo's eyes widened. Suddenly feeling the usage of chakra, the duo abruptly split, jabbing chakra-laced feet to the ground to rapidly vacate the clearing, which was then filled with spreading seals, some of which shot out wood, others fire, lightning, and one a jet of hissing water. How did I miss that? I knew about my Inyotan in release, but the reason I was so prized back in Yuzu, and even at the fire temple, this can't be right, but it's right here. He trailed off, looking the Hokage dead in the eye. Mokutan would release, of all things. Hiruzen scrunched his eyes in resignation. That was why I demanded the tests be rerun, on different equipment and everything. This puts you in a very, very difficult situation. Should you be seen using it, you'd never be able to leave the village without being hunted. Not to mention our own village's reaction. You're already a target for the CRA as it is. Rikudo slunk back further into his chair. This is bad. Wait a minute. I don't have an earth affinity. Not that my elemental seal showed. Anyway. Oh, it only shows up to 4. I forgot in my state of mind. Rikudo buried his face in his hands. It's not like I don't know any more of Konoha's abilities now, huh? Hiraishin, Mokutan, Kagebunshin, amongst others. Still, this gives me something to try my best towards in addition to Hiraishin. I wonder. A style that combined Mokutan and Hiraishin. He cackled softly. Hiruzen watched on as Rikudo babbled before him, obviously in a state of shock. You know, Rikudo-kun, the scroll of seals now has something else that rightfully belongs to you, also via blood relation. Rikudo snapped up and delivered an intelligent reply, huh? Hiruzen simply disappeared in a shunshin, only to return moments later with the same majestic scroll of seals. Taking a moment to peruse through it, he retrieved a smaller fat scroll and passed it across the desk. That scroll is full of Mokutan Jutsu that Hashirama-sensei documented in case any of his heirs managed to activate the bloodline. Although yours may be dormant, but the sheet says latent, so it just means you have the ability to use it, but you haven't been aware of it up until now. Start with the Mokubunshin no Jutsu with clone technique to get a feel for using Mokutan chakra, then go from there. 2 of Hashirama-sensei's most devastating techniques, Mokutan Hijitsu, Jukai Koten, would release secret technique, Nativity of a Sea of Trees, and Mokutan, is in there, along with the technique that made him widely feared, Mokutan, Hokage Shiki Jijuin Jutsu, Kakuan Nit Ten Sui Shu, would release, Hokage-style 60-year-old technique, enclosed hermitage entering society with bliss-bringing hands, or in other words, the jutsu used to subdue Biju. Rikudo looked at the Hokage in awe, and then gazed at the scroll in his hands, taking off his upper body garments, confusing the Hokage until he saw a complex storage sealing array over his heart. I take it you know what this seal does should I die, Rikudo said gravely, not looking up, instead nicking his thumb on one of his slightly prominent canines and swiping it over the seal, activating it. Then, pressing the scroll against the seal, it was slowly sucked into it, leaving nothing behind, and as there was nothing else to seal, the matrix faded away, leaving Rikudo's moderately scarred chest behind. He quickly redressed and bowed to the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I thank you for your time in personally discussing this with me. I will ensure that I only train this in absolute secrecy in my clan's compound. See that you do, Rikudo-kun. In a week, show me your progress. If you are able to use Mokutan with reliability, I have someone that you would benefit greatly from meeting. Konoha Academy Building. Naruto sat slumped at his desk, trying to sleep for all he was worth. Having a surname so far back in the alphabet was beginning to wear on his nerves, Sasuke next to him feeling much the same way but refusing to show it. The ninjutsu section was currently underway, and after waiting a total of an hour including the break, Naruto was simply fed up. Calm down. It won't get you anywhere losing your cool, Sasuke mumbled, casting a glance at his somewhat friend. Naruto stopped tapping his foot and sighed. I know, Sasuke. It's just dash. Uchiha Sasuke, off you go, a nondescript academy instructor called out, pointing to the examination room door. Naruto just let his face hit the desk in resignation as the raven left. Not before long, however, he was jolted awake with a loud voice. Uzumaki Naruto, you're up, quick into the room. Good luck. Sasuke, now returned, just sat back with a smug look under his heighty ape, which Naruto wanted nothing more than to shove down his throat, but had no time after all, he was about to graduate. Naruto quietly closed the doors, turning to the three instructors behind a long table. Yumino Irika, Sasaki Mizuki, and a newly hired examiner, Yamada Teru. Naruto bowed as he stood before them. So, Naruto, are you ready? In this section, you need to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, the Kawarimi no Jutsu, and the Henge no Jutsu, but also an optional fourth technique. Proceed, Yamada explained. Naruto raised his hand timidly. Yamada-sensei, can I use Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique, and an Uzumaki Sealing Technique? Yamada looked up and assessed the redhead. It wouldn't surprise me if he was forced to use it due to his chakra composition. Go ahead, Uzumaki-san. However, do note that we do not usually condone such high-rank jutsu without prior notice from your parent or guardian, which Uzumaki-sama has already provided. Naruto nodded his understanding. Seallessly, Naruto sent 3 Kage Bunshin in 3 separate directions behind him, switched with one, transformed the other into his cousin, Uzumaki Rikudo, who crossed his arms and stared imperially at the examiners, making even Yamada draw a breath. Then, shocking the examiners, the transformed Rikudo slammed a seal tag on the ground and called Uzumaki fuinjutsu Gyaku Kekai, Uzumaki sealing style, reverse barrier, as the real Naruto pegged a kunai at the newly erected barrier, only for it to bounce off and embed itself into the other side of the room with a heavy thunk. Well then, Naruto-kun, you've done extremely well. I can only see to award you full points for this section, having used no hand seals at all, even for a B-rank kenjutsu. Well done. Come and collect your forehead protector. Irika beamed, passing a forehead protector with a black cloth to the exuberant redhead. Go on, head outside.
Hi, Iruka-sensei.
Thank you, he said, bowing once to his teacher and once again to the examiners. After Naruto had run out, of course leaving the doors wide open in his excitement, Yamada sighed. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Irika could only chuckle. He's going to wear us out, I'm absolutely certain. The blinding light finally faded from Naruto's eyes as he dashed out of the room, leaving a solemn Sasuke behind looking after him. Suddenly he'd felt a pair of arms wrap around him, followed by the wave of what felt to be bright, warm green chakra, and Naruto instinctively returned the hug, knowing instantly who it was by the chakra alone, a chakra he could distinguish from many kilometers away. See? I knew you'd ace it. Now, why don't you come along, Sasuke? We're going to Ichiraku Ramen. Oh no, you don't. Rikudo grinned, a wicked gleam in his eye that made Sasuke edge away even faster, only to be stopped as Rikudo grabbed his arm, having already contact with Naruto, vanished in a high-powered shunshin, leaving no trace of them being there. Seconds later, Rikudo landed from the shunshin and dove through the flaps, only to be beaten by a mere millisecond by a hungry genin. Sasuke, however, was on the ground outside, dazed by the shunshin, suddenly grabbed, propped up against a wall and left to recover as Naruto retook his seat and gazed at Tsuchi's back. "Oi, old man, what gives? You're taking too long," Naruto brashly called, wiping the drool from his mouth, then whining as Rikudo whacked him over the back of the head. "Be nice to the man who serves us ramen worthy of the Uzumaki, you little shit," Rikudo scolded, turning to the ramen chef with a grin stretching from ear to ear. "Now, I put my pre-order in this morning, but we've got a tag-along," Rikudo explained, patting Sasuke on the cheek without looking away from a bemused Tsuchi. "That's no problem. I'd accounted for you lot, so we have the normal amount of supplies on top of that. Oh, looks like your Uchiha friend is awake. I wonder what happened to him," Tsuchi wondered, turning back to tend to the cooking ramen. "What the hell?" Sasuke grumbled, coming to and looking around him confusedly. "Where am I?" Rikudo waved without breaking his staring competition with the awaiting bowl. "Ichiraku Ramen. You started to run away, so I brought you along with one of my shunshins. I figured it'd knock you for a 6 long enough for the ramen to cook and you not being able to refuse," Rikudo mumbled, also wiping the drool from his face. Sasuke deadpanned. "So this is the second Red Death? The only one to surpass Shirsue's skill with the Shunshin no Jutsu? And he's drooling? Oh god. Don't look." "Ready," Tsuchi called, and as soon as the bowls had hit the bench, the two Uzumaki had already called Itadikamasu and hoed into their bowls, as Sasuke looked on in morbid fascination, then looking in between his bowl and the two redheads scarfing down the dishes. Shrugging off his misgivings about a free meal, Sasuke also dug in and couldn't help but admire how good it was. By no means falling to the allure, he did enjoy the meal. After thanking Rikudo for the meal, he was about to leave when he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Uchiha Sasuke, you know that my home is always open to you, regardless. I will not force you often into taking me up on that offer, but do know it is open." Sasuke closed his eyes and shrugged off the hand, before leaving without a word. "What a butt," Naruto grumbled in between mouthfuls of his 6th bowl. Rikudo cast an eye to his finished 6th, but felt replete. After paying Tsuchi and dragging Naruto away by the ear, he found a deserted alley and performed the Hiraishin to get them home instantly. Rikudo then sighed, knowing what he then had to do. "Naruto, we're going downstairs, and I mean downstairs. Rikudo called, making hand seals and molding his chakra into a certain shape and to the right frequency. "Oh, I love that place. Let's go." Naruto jumped over to Rikudo, clutching onto his back like a sloth on a tree, much to Rikudo's ire, but didn't last long as the duo disappeared in another red flash. Uzumaki Training Chamber. "Naruto-kun, get off." "Squirt, really? I have to show you something, but I need to talk to you first." "Ugh, you're a little shit sometimes," Rikudo grumbled, letting loose a torrent of chakra, sending Naruto flying with a happy squeal. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Rikudo sighed. "Get over here, squirt." Naruto laughed as he ran over and sat on his butt with his legs sprawled out. "What's up? It's gotta be important if we came down here." Rikudo nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is. Listen, I had Hokage Gigi run some extra blood tests on me to see if I could find any of my family records that may exist here in Konoha. And he found some serious, heavy results." Naruto cocked his head to the side. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" "What I'm about to tell you, you cannot repeat unless me or the Hokage says so. Do you understand?" Rikudo was deadly serious. Naruto could tell by the agitated nature of his chakra. Nodding quickly, Rikudo eased back. I found out that my great-grandparents are none other than Uzumaki Mito and the Shodai Hokage, Senju Hashirama. Whoa, that's so cool. Naruto was wide-eyed at his cousin that somehow became even cooler. There's more, though, Rikudo continued. It also showed that I have two bloodline limits. The Inyotan in release, that I already knew about and we both have. But the second is what I came down here to test with you. Apparently I have a latent bloodline limit, one that people call Mokutan, would release. Rikudo sighed, taking off his upper clothes, confusing Naruto. No way, Naruto gasped, sitting back in shock. You can use Shodai-sama's Kekkei Genkai? But, whoa, Naruto said again, watching Rikudo whip through hand seals, draw blood and withdraw the Mokutan scroll from his heart seal. Studying the first jutsu for a moment, Rikudo went through a variety of hand seals before completing the chain with the serpent seal.
Mokuton. Moku Bunshin no Jutsu.
Would release. Would clone technique? Rikudo called, feeling a tug at the back of his neck, turned to find a partially correct clone. However, the left eye was missing, the left arm was made of wood, and the right leg was malformed. Eyes widening in realization that he did indeed have the ability to use the wood release, Rikudo grinned widely, and skimming to the technique he had in mind, his Ryuringen activated on the high of his chakra, and he perceived the chakra imprinted into the scroll by none other than Hashirama himself. Weaving through the introductory use hand seals, Rikudo clapped his hands together into the serpent seal, letting his impressive chakra flare, rolling off of him in whipping green flames, making Naruto take a few steps back to ease the pressure of being near such potent chakra. Mokutan Hijitsu, Jukai Koten, would release secret technique, nativity of a sea of trees. Rikudo roared, flooding his chakra into the jutsu, which resulted in scores of trees filling the cavernous space, rushing and pushing around each other, shattering the air with leaves and branches, a testament to Rikudo's affinity to the element. But also, leaving a collapsed, panting Rikudo on the ground, with Naruto calling out his name frantically. Thinking of the only person he knew to help, he pushed chakra into the seal on his side, alerting both Rikudo and the Sandaime Hokage of his plight. Being the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Naruto wanted to have a failsafe that could alert people should he be threatened. Rikudo groaned weakly, his Ryuringen fading, leaving his rich violet eyes, that unfocused as he lost consciousness. In seconds, Hiruzen had managed to unlock his way through several layers of seals and barriers to reach the two, stopping dead in his tracks at the sight of the behemoth forest that stood majestically before him. Holy mother of log! That's fucking huge! He cursed, rushing over to a sobbing Naruto and a clearly chakra-exhausted Rikudo, along with a collapsed Moku Bunshin. Sighing in exasperation, he patted Naruto on the head, drawing his attention. Gigi, help! He suddenly used that jutsu, and his chakra was so powerful. Then, after muttering something, "He's sick," Naruto babbled, pointing to his downed cousin, who was now breathing normally. "Don't fret, Naruto-kun. He's just got chakra exhaustion, which for an Uzumaki to get, well, this is probably only the second time I've ever seen it. Not to mention this jutsu. Of course, Rikudo had to empty his reserves to get a result like this, but for him to be even able to use it on this scale in the first place is simply incredible. Not only that, it looks like it was his second Mokutan jutsu he's ever done. The potential within this young man is simply unheard of since Hashirama-sensei's time. No doubt little Naruto here will be too far behind either." Hiruzen explained to the young boy, calming him greatly with a touch. Sniffing, Naruto nodded, helping the Hokage transport Rikudo to the lounge in the main house, before the third departed with a wave in a shunshin. This left Naruto to his down devices, and to anyone that knows either of the resident Uzumaki well at all, that means trouble. As a wicked grin spread of the redhead's features, elsewhere several Anbu agents suddenly felt like they'd been washed with pins. 1 week later, Rikudo had since learned not to pump all of his chakra into Mokutan jutsu as they required more chakra than he was used to producing for regular jutsu, save for his Inyotan jutsu, but he had very few of those as it was. Being unconscious for a whole 12 hours and having to reprimand his little cousin for the subsequent unsupervised, village-wide pranks was enough to reinforce that lesson. As for Naruto, he'd been dropped off at the academy by Rikudo, who then vanished after giving a 2-finger salute and an eye smile. Shrugging off his cousin's odd behavior, feeling that he knew something that Naruto didn't, he headed into the academy to find Sasuke on his own and a couple of others like Aburame Shino and Hyuga Hinata. Immediately choosing to sit next to Sasuke, who acknowledged him with a nod, Naruto began to pester him about his week, only to receive a series of urchin grunts of various lengths. Eventually giving up on that, he decided to do the next best thing, sleep. He awoke to being elbowed in the ribs from Sasuke, who gestured towards the now present and irritated Iruka. "Now, if I have all of your attention," Iruka growled, throwing a sharp look at Naruto, who blinked innocently, "I can continue with team assignments. Remember, your Jonin-sensei are now your teachers and immediate superiors." Again, Naruto let his head fall to the desk, only to perk up when he heard his name. Team 7 consists of Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura, only to be cut off by Sakura's squeal, and various other groans from fangirls and fanboys alike. Coughing, Iruka continued, "And your Jonin-sensei will be Hatake Kakashi." "Oh, that's why," Naruto groaned, realizing why Rikudo and Ai had acted funny that morning. He knew all along that Kakashi-san would be my Jonin-sensei. "That traitorous bastard," Naruto growled, flames roaring to life in his eyes as he made a fist. Sasuke looked on, confused and eager to change the subject of the Banshee being on their team. "What's that meant to mean?" Naruto turned to face him with a groan. "Rikudo and Ai often does missions with this elite Jonin called Hatake Kakashi, or the Copy Ninja. He's really late all of the time, perverted, and doesn't talk much. Seems like a pretty cool guy though, when he's been around at home." Listening to Naruto's explanation, Sasuke held back a sigh. "So how long are we in for?" Naruto's head falling to the desk again was enough of an answer. 3 fucking hours. Language. Sure enough, close to Naruto's prediction, Hatake Kakashi did indeed turn up 3 hours late. Exactly. What the 2 other genin didn't notice, however, because Sasuke was too busy trying to sleep and Sakura was fawning over him, that Naruto had long since placed a few lots of seals around the entrance, some more conspicuous than others. So, when Kakashi had decided that enough was enough and that it was time to go in and greet his sensei's son and resign himself to dealing with the other 2, he walked in, only reflexively jump as the first array activated, almost ensnaring him in a vicious paralysis seal, only for his eye to widen in dismay as the secondary array activated, forming a solid blue barrier, trapping him inside. Seeing the perpetrator barely able to control his laughter and pointing above his head, Kakashi looked up to see a bucket of water upside down, with the water only held back by the glowing blue chakra of the barrier. Suppressing a sigh, Kakashi instead leveled a glare at Naruto, who was still laughing with no apparent effort to restrain himself. "My first impression of you all? You suck. Meet me on the roof," Kakashi murmured, idly studying the seal array on the floor. "Looks like he's well-versed in barrier techniques, but that's probably because of Rikudo's teaching. He's made absolutely sure I can't render the array defunct by keeping all of it outside of the walls, and a considerable distance back, too." However, Kakashi mused, fighting back a smile. Things were interesting already. Sasuke was not sure whether to laugh, sneer at their Jonin-sensei for falling for such a trick, or just go back to sleep. Shrugging, he opted for a mixture of the latter two. Sakura was about to hit Naruto over the back of the head and reprimand him for trapping their sensei like that, but stopped with a sharp intake of breath when she saw the barrier shatter apart, dropping the bucket of water over him. Kakashi retracted his hand, after simply shattering the barrier with lightning chakra, an extremely low-powered Raikiri fading from his hand. Before the water could hit the Jonin, he simply vanished in a shunshin, leaving the 3 genin to get up and chase their escapist sensei upstairs. Kakashi wasn't surprised when it was Naruto who made it first, in a very impressive shunshin for his age. "So, Rikudo already taught you that technique, huh?" Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, but he said that if he caught me trying to use it in battle, though he'd dye my hair green with a seal that I couldn't break. But it's okay. I don't think I can handle it in battle anyway yet." Naruto waved it off, sitting down to wait for his teammates to arrive. Kakashi merely sighed. Today was going to be a long day. "Okay, Pinky, you first. Names, likes, dislikes, dream for the future. Go." Kakashi drawled, not deigning to look up from his smut. Sakura cocked her head to the side and furrowed her brow. Can you give an example for us, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto just palmed his face. Sakura-san, that was pretty self-explanatory. Did you really have to ask? Sasuke just nodded, making Sakura slump in a fit of depression. Kakashi groaned internally, but pointed to Naruto instead. You there, matchstick. Go. Naruto formed a fist, and his hair seemed to twitch, but he held his composure and continued nevertheless. Well, my name's Uzumaki Naruto, don't wear it out. I like fuinjutsu, ramen, egging my cousin Rakuto on until he tries to roast me alive, and mischief. I hate waiting, tests, incompetent people, and idiots. My dream for the future? To find every Uzumaki that's lost out there, and bring them home. Then, perhaps I'll move on to bigger and better things. Naruto's countenance changed dramatically throughout his speech, at times forming fists, mock drooling, and at the end, a soft smile and truthful words. Kakashi couldn't help but sweat drop at Naruto's introduction. He's exactly like Kushinae was, right down to the temper and all. I swear if his hair was long enough it would react like hers did, too. Okay, has Pinky recovered yet? Good, now go. Naruto gave you your example. Kakashi drawled, his face once more into the smut. Sakura sat bolt upright. My name's Haruno Sakura. I like. She trailed off, giggling in Sasuke's direction, whilst Naruto mock gagged over the side of the seat. Meanwhile, Sakura continued, my dislikes are anyone who thinks they're better than Sasuke-kun, and spicy things. My dream for the future? Sakura barely concealed a nosebleed as she tried in vain not to look in Sasuke's direction. Sasuke coughed and inched closer to Naruto. My name's Uchiha Sasuke. I don't like very much. Tomatoes, a good fight, and people who can see beyond bullshit and who have no tolerance for it. I dislike most things, and my dream for the future? To kill Uchiha Itachi, but not before wringing his neck for answers. He firmly ignored Sakura's large adoring eyes as he again inched closer to Naruto, who didn't mind. Kakashi snapped his book shut and heaved himself off the railing. Since we've all introduced ourselves dash, he stopped as Naruto coughed loudly. Sensei, what about you? Naruto asked innocently, looking up at a tired Kakashi. Fine. Seeing as Matchstick wants me to introduce myself, I'm Hatake Kakashi. I like things, dislike some others, and yeah, I dream of the future sometimes. Okay, meet me at Training Ground 7 at 5 a.m. tomorrow for oh yes, training, and I suggest you don't eat breakfast. You might throw it up. Kakashi added his last note with an eye smile before performing a leaf shunshin, leaving the genin to themselves. Well, that was, interesting. Naruto picked his ear. Well, I'm going home. See you lot tomorrow at 8. He was about to leave before Sakura called him with a shout. But Kakashi-sensei said 5 a.m. Weren't you listening, you idiot? She screeched, turning to Sasuke, expecting him to see her telling off the class clown, only to meet uncaring air. Haruno Sakura, understand this. You're an embarrassment to Kunoichi, with your fawning and idiocy. With the rate you're going, Kakashi's definitely going to fail you tomorrow. Oh, I've said too much. I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that. Sakura startled, spinning around to find a larger, older version of Naruto, save for the man's menacing eyes, glowing a forest green, and with a pattern that resembled the Sharingan. However, he was cursing himself out. Well, off you go, Pinky. And yeah, turn up at least 2.5 hours late tomorrow. Kakashi might throw you by turning up half an hour before he normally does. Rakuto added over his shoulder, walking over to Naruto, only to grasp his arm, and both vanished in a perfect shunshin, leaving no trace of movement. Fail me tomorrow? What on earth could that mean? We're already genin. But, am I really that bad? Sakura slumped back onto the bench, the space seeming a lot larger now she was left to her own thoughts. Uzumaki compound. Wow, you really shot that girl down, Rakuto and I wanted to say it, but Naruto trailed off, thinking of the best way to phrase his thoughts. You're too kind for your own good, Squirt, Rakuto commented, poking his head into the kitchen sink cupboard to search for the cleaning chemicals. "And you're just too much of an ass," Naruto quipped, idly cleaning his fuinjutsu brushes. "Don't you know it?" came a muffled reply, as Rikudo was still searching. "Oh fuck it, I'll get some tomorrow. The benches can wait," he cursed, closing the doors with a huff. "So, Squirt, I had a thought and it's pretty serious. I think, seeing as I'm directly descended from Shodai-sama, and your mother was a close relation of mine, it could be all too possible you might have inherited the Mokutan too," Rikudo murmured, stroking his chin. Naruto put the brush down. "Wait, I could be able to use it too?" Rikudo shrugged. "It's possible, but at best, pure conjecture at this point. After your TE training tomorrow, I'll take you to the hospital to get a blood and chakra tests." Rikudo coughed when he nearly spilled Kakashi's beans. Naruto's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but he shrugged it off after a few moments. "Well, I'm going to practice. Wanna come? You can keep working on your explosive seals there, remember?" At the mere mention of explosives, like a true Uzumaki, Naruto had bundled up his sealing supplies and had latched onto Rikudo's side like a leech, causing the latter to sweat drop. "Naruto, you're almost 12. What are you doing?" Rikudo looked down at his sheepish cousin. Naruto indignantly replied, his mouth full of sealing brushes. Shaking his head, Rikudo located the correct seal tag and activated the Hiraition to teleport to it. Rikudo then went up one end of the training cavern and began weaving through seals.
Mokutan, Otei no Jutsu.
Would release. Laughing Buddha technique. He hissed, clapping into the serpent seal, and manipulated 3 large wooden hands that burst through the ground, swatting at imaginary enemies and jabbing at others, and the last was coiled around Rikudo protectively. Naruto, however, had a thought. "Rikudo nii, could I talk to the Kyuubi?" he called, the surprise of the other redhead causing the wooden hands to drop to the ground as he lost his control of the technique. "You what? Oh hell no. Not without me in there, you're not. Sit still." Rikudo rushed over and sat in the lotus position opposite Naruto. "Look into my eyes, Naruto," Rikudo whispered, once he'd felt that Naruto had calmed down enough to force their way into his mindscape. Naruto felt slightly alarmed when he felt his surroundings shift rapidly, to be replaced with a prairie plain, with a very densely populated forest off to one area, and never-ending valleys and undulating hills, all with long grass gently waving in a non-existent breeze. Rikudo's eyes widened at the forest. "So, looks like you might have just inherited the Mokutan. Hey Squirt." Naruto startled, only to find Rikudo beside him. "How did you get here?" Rikudo looked down to Naruto's curious gaze. "You've been here before then? How far have you gone?" Naruto looked aside. I've been up as far as the forest, but there's a real angry, scared, and hateful chakra in there, and I think it's the Kyuubi. I've been too scared to go any further."